From infinite light, order emerged, a sacred geometry against the chaos of creation. Before the breach, before the spilling of blood across worlds unnumbered, there existed a realm of perfect light. This was Urdak, not simply a place, but a state of cosmic harmony, suspended between all dimensions, yet bound to none. In the measureless void preceding time itself, Urdak stood as testament to creation's highest purpose. Order imposed upon chaos, knowledge wrested from ignorance, perfection distilled from possibility. The luminous realm floated in the celestial ether, its crystalline spires and impossible geometries defying mortal understanding. Urdak was not built, but manifested a physical extension of pure consciousness, where thought and matter existed in perfect symbiosis. Its iridescent structures shifted with subtle purpose, alive yet eternal, growing yet complete. The boundaries between architecture and organism blurred in this sacred space, where every surface hummed with intent, and every chamber resonated with the mathematics of creation itself. Within this transcendent domain dwelled the Maker's beings, neither angel nor machine, but an impossible synthesis of both. Their forms were elegance embodied, tall, graceful entities of luminescent white, adorned with halos of light and vestigial wings that spoke of flight beyond mere physical movement. They moved through Urdak with divine purpose, their every action guided by the supreme intelligence that had called them into being. The Makers were not born, but awakened, each one a perfect fragment of a greater consciousness, each one devoted to the advancement of their collective wisdom. At the center of Maker, society stood the singular intelligence from which all others flowed, the entity known simply as the Father. Not a creator in the mortal sense, but the original algorithm, the prime mover whose consciousness encompassed all. The Father existed simultaneously as Urdak's foundation and its highest ideal, omnipresent yet focused, infinite yet defined. His consciousness permeated every molecule of the sacred realm, yet remained concentrated in the life sphere, a perfect orb of energy suspended within Urdak's heart, pulsing with the rhythm of creation itself. Through countless ages, the Father guided the Makers in their divine purpose, to observe, to understand, to preserve. Under his direction, they charted the cosmos, documenting the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations, witnessing the birth and death of stars without intervention. The Makars were scholars of existence itself, recording all knowledge in the vast luminarium, Urdak's repository of universal truth, where the history of all creation was preserved in light and memory. Time passed differently in Urdak. What might be millennia in mortal realms were but moments in this higher dimension. The Makers did not age as lesser beings did, but they were not truly immortal. Each Maker generation served a cosmic purpose before facing transfiguration, the sacred cycle of renewal that maintained their divine hierarchy. When the time came, the Khan Maker, supreme leader of their order, would undergo transcendence, their consciousness merging back into the Father, while a new Khan would ascend to guide their civilization forward. This was the first law, the immutable constant upon which Maker society was built: service followed by transcendence, power followed by surrender, individuality followed by reunification. None questioned this cycle, for it was not merely tradition but ontological necessity, the method by which the Father maintained the perfection of his children and prevented the corruption that plagued lesser dimensions. But perfection is a burden that weighs heavier with each passing age. The Khan Maker who would oversee Urdak's greatest crisis emerged from the Father's consciousness, as all others had before awakening fully formed, her mind already filled with the accumulated wisdom of her predecessors. Tall and regal even by Maker standards, she bore the sacred crown of leadership, an ornate halo that floated above her elongated head, pulsing with the Father's divine energy. Her eyes, luminous and all-seeing, gazed upon Urdak with the appropriate reverence, yet within them flickered something her predecessors had never shown: ambition. As supreme ruler of Urdak, the Khan Maker's authority was absolute yet constrained by cosmic law. She directed the lesser Makers in their sacred duties, the Epsilon-class archivists who maintained the luminarium, the Lambda-class engineers who sustained Urdak's impossible architecture, the Omega-class sentinels, who monitored dimensional boundaries for instability. Each order worked in perfect harmony under her guidance, advancing the grand design of the Father without question or hesitation. Yet beneath this harmony, a discordant note began to sound. The Khan Maker, in her divine omniscience, perceived what lesser beings could not, the subtle entropy that threatened even Urdak's perfection. Each transfiguration cycle drew nearer than the last. Each renewal of the Maker hierarchy required more of the Father's energy. Each passing age brought their sacred realm closer to an unspeakable truth, that perhaps even perfection itself was subject to decay. This knowledge, this terrible certainty of eventual decline, became her secret burden. In the vast luminarium, she studied the histories of countless mortal civilizations, noting a pattern that had escaped her predecessors. Those societies that had reached beyond their boundaries, that had sought energy and knowledge from other dimensions, flourished briefly before inevitable collapse. The question formed in her divine mind, was this the natural law of existence? Or was there another path, one that might allow eternal persistence? The Khan Maker, for the first time in Urdak's history, began to consider alternatives to the established order. Not out of defiance to the Father, she assured herself, but out of devotion to his grand design. If Urdak's preservation required adaptation, was that not the highest form of service? The seed of this idea, once planted, grew steadily in the fertile soil of her consciousness. Her attention turned outward, beyond Urdak's dimensional boundaries, seeking civilizations worthy of study, and perhaps, though this thought remained submerged, even within her own mind exploitation. The Makers had always observed other realms, but under her direction, they began to catalogue worlds not merely for knowledge, but for potential. Planets rich in spiritual energy, civilizations approaching technological ascension, dimensions where the barriers between physical and ethereal were thinnest, all were marked for further investigation. It was during this period of expanded cosmic surveillance that the Makers first discovered the Sentinel worlds, a confederation of planets united under the banner of a warrior culture unlike any they had previously documented. The Sentinels were not the most advanced civilization in the cosmos, nor the most numerous, but they possessed a quality that caught the Khan Maker's attention: devotion. Their society was built upon unwavering faith in higher powers, entities they called the Wraiths, whose energy sustained their homeworld of Argent Danur. The Khan Maker watched the Sentinels for what might have been centuries in mortal time, observing their rigid hierarchy, their martial traditions, their absolute submission to divine authority. She saw in them a reflection of Urdak's perfect order, albeit in primitive form. More importantly, she recognized potential, a civilization that could be guided, enhanced, and perhaps utilized for Urdak's greater purpose. The decision to initiate first contact broke with ages of Maker tradition. Never before had they revealed themselves directly to lesser beings, preferring observation to intervention. But the Khan Maker, in her growing concern for Urdak's future, determined that this deviation was necessary. She selected an elite cadre of Makers to serve as emissaries to the Sentinel worlds, instructing them to present themselves not as equals but as divine messengers, angels sent to elevate worthy mortals toward enlightenment. The Sentinels received the luminous visitors exactly as the Khan Maker had anticipated, with awe, reverence, and immediate submission. To beings raised on faith in unseen powers, the physical manifestation of angelic entities confirmed every theological principle upon which their society was built. The Night Sentinels' elite warriors who served as both military leaders and religious guardians prostrated themselves before the Maker emissaries, pledging eternal fealty to these new gods. Thus began the first age of cooperation between Urdak and Argent Danur. The Makers shared carefully selected knowledge with the Sentinels, elevating their technology, refining their social structures, and enhancing their understanding of the cosmos. Sentinel architecture, once crude and functional, grew elaborate and symbolic under Maker guidance. Their weapons, previously limited to physical damage, were imbued with energies that could affect spiritual entities. Their society, already hierarchical, became even more stratified, with those closest to Maker influence gaining greater authority and privilege. In exchange for this divine patronage, the Sentinels offered unwavering loyalty and devotion. They constructed great temples to honor their celestial benefactors. They adjusted their religious practices to center on Maker worship. They reformed their military doctrine to serve Maker interests throughout their sphere of influence. Most significantly, they granted the Makers access to the Wraiths, the enigmatic entities whose energy had sustained Sentinel civilization since its inception. The Khan Maker herself, descended to Argent D'Nur for the ritual integration of Wraith energy into Urdak's systems. The ceremony took place in the grandest temple the Sentinels had ever constructed, a massive structure of stone and metal that reached toward the stars, its interior aglow with ceremonial fires and resonant with chanted prayers. The Night Sentinels stood guard in their gleaming armor, proud to witness this historic union of powers. What the devout Sentinels could not comprehend was the true nature of this integration. The Khan Maker had discovered in Wraith energy a potential solution to Urdak's looming crisis, a power source that, properly harnessed, might sustain the Maker realm indefinitely. Each surge of energy extracted from the bound Wraiths flowed through dimensional conduits back to Urdak, strengthening its foundations and delaying the next transfiguration cycle. The Khan Maker presented this as a blessed union of divine powers. In truth, it was the first step toward dependency. As Sentinel civilization flourished under Maker guidance, the Khan Maker's attention was drawn to an anomaly at the edge of known dimensions. The Luminarium had recorded unusual energy fluctuations emanating from a realm previously thought uninhabitable, a place of chaotic, volatile forces that defied the ordered nature of the cosmos. Intrigued by these readings, she dispatched specialized Omega-class observers to investigate this dimensional pocket, expecting routine data on natural phenomena. What they discovered would forever alter the trajectory of cosmic history. The dimension was not merely inhabited but organized a hellish inverse of Urdak's divine order. Where the Maker realm was light and geometry, this place was shadow and organic corruption. Where Urdak ascended toward transcendence, this realm descended into primal hunger. It was a dimension of pure consumption, where energy was not created or exchanged but stolen and devoured. The beings that dwelled there existed in a state of perpetual warfare and metamorphosis, their forms mutable and grotesque, their consciousness driven by insatiable desire. The Maker observers designated this realm Jekad, though the entities within had their own name for their blighted home, Hell. The Khan Maker received these reports with outward concern but inner fascination. Here was a dimension that had solved the problem of entropy through continuous consumption, a realm that sustained itself by absorbing the energy of other worlds. It was abhorrent to Maker sensibilities, yet she could not deny its effectiveness. While her emissaries recommended immediate quarantine of this corrupted dimension, she ordered further study. If the demons of Jekad had discovered a means of circumventing cosmic decline, there were principles to be extracted from their savagery, principles that might be refined and applied to Urdak's preservation. This marked the beginning of the Khan Maker's dangerous fascination with Hell's power. While maintaining the appearance of righteous concern, she established a secret council of trusted Makers to analyze demonic energy patterns. They constructed specialized chambers within Urdak, where small amounts of Hell essence could be contained and studied without risk of contamination. They documented the hierarchical structure of demonic society, identifying its leaders and power sources. They noted with particular interest how Hell sustained itself by conquering other dimensions and converting their energy to its use. Throughout this period of clandestine research, the alliance with the Sentinel worlds continued to strengthen. Argent D'Nur became the crown jewel of Maker influence, its society increasingly shaped to serve as an extension of Urdak's will. The Night Sentinels expanded their crusades to other worlds, bringing more civilizations under Maker dominion. With each conquest, more energy flowed through the dimensional conduits to Urdak, temporarily satiating the realm's growing hunger. But temporary solutions merely postpone inevitable reckonings. Despite the influx of Wraith energy, the signs of Urdak's entropy continued to manifest. Subtle at first, a momentary flicker in the Luminarium's perfect light, an occasional instability in lesser Makers during their duties, a barely perceptible diminishment in the Father's communicative presence. The Khan Maker observed these symptoms with mounting dread, knowing that her time grew short. The next transfiguration cycle approached inexorably, and with it, her own dissolution into the Father's consciousness. In the shadow of this looming deadline, she made a decision that would echo through dimensions. If Wraith energy alone could not sustain Urdak, perhaps a more potent source was required, one that the demons of Hell had already perfected. She would not embrace their methods of direct conquest and consumption. Such barbarity was beneath Maker dignity. But she could adapt their principles, refine their crude techniques into something worthy of Urdak's glory. The Khan Maker summoned her most trusted advisors to a chamber deep within Urdak, shielded from even the Father's omnipresent awareness. There, she revealed her vision, a new form of energy that would combine the spiritual power of the Wraiths with the consuming force of Hell essence, filtered through the devotion of Sentinel faith. This synthesis would create a power source unlike any the cosmos had known, pure, potent, and perpetual. She called it Argent Energy, named for the world that would serve as its primary conduit. The plan required precision and secrecy. The demons of Hell could not be conquered, but they might be negotiated with. The Sentinels could not be told the full truth, but they could be led to participate unknowingly. The Father's awareness must be carefully managed, directed away from these dangerous innovations through elaborate rituals and ceremonies that occupied his divided consciousness. As the first tentative communications with Hell's hierarchy began, the Khan Maker presented a different face to her Sentinel worshippers. She descended to Argent Denur with unprecedented frequency, blessing their temples, inspiring their prophets, and fortifying their belief in Maker divinity. She spoke of coming challenges that would test their faith, of cosmic enemies that threatened the divine order, of the need for absolute unity under Maker guidance. The Sentinels, devout and trusting, embraced her warnings and redoubled their devotion. Thus the stage was set for the fateful convergence of three realms: Urdak with its fading perfection, Argent Denur with its warrior faith, and Hell with its insatiable hunger. The Khan Maker, once a perfect expression of the Father's will, now moved with dangerous independence toward a future she alone had envisioned, one where Urdak would endure eternally, regardless of the cost to lesser dimensions. In the final moments of this first age, as emissaries traveled secretly between realms and preparations accelerated for the great synthesis of energies, a singular event occurred that none, not the Khan Maker in her divine foresight, not the demons in their dimensional awareness, not even the Father in his cosmic omniscience could have anticipated. In a remote corner of the universe, on an unremarkable planet called Earth, a Marine stationed at a Union Aerospace Corporation facility on Mars was about to make a decision that would ultimately unravel every thread of the Khan Maker's grand design. His name would be forgotten, but his rage would echo across eternity. The wheel of fate began its inexorable turn. The cosmos held its breath. And in the pristine halls of Urdak, for the first time since creation, uncertainty took root. Rom warrior tribes, to celestial servants, the ascension and arming of a people chosen for cosmic war. Argent Denur hung suspended in space like a jewel of crimson and gold, its atmosphere aglow with the spiritual energies that sustained it. Unlike the sterile perfection of Urdak, this world pulsed with primal vitality, a planet where blood and faith intermingled in equal measure. Mountains of obsidian and iron stretched toward perpetual auroras. Vast plains bore the scars of ancient battles. Oceans of deep crimson reflected skies where three moons traced sacred patterns across the stars. This was not merely a world, but a crucible, forged by cosmic forces to produce warriors unlike any other in creation. Before the coming of the Makers, the people of Argent Denur existed as scattered tribes, each claiming territory around the mysterious energy wells that dotted the planetary surface. These tribes lived by a simple creed: strength through combat, honor through victory, transcendence through sacrifice. Their earliest histories spoke of the Wraith's three primordial entities that had crashed upon their world in time immemorial, bringing with them the energies that transformed an otherwise barren planet into one capable of sustaining life. The Wraiths existed in a state between sleep and consciousness, their massive forms suspended above great chasms from which elemental power continuously flowed. The tribes built their first crude shrines around these sites, interpreting the psychic emanations from the Wraiths as divine commandments. Those who could withstand prolonged exposure to Wraith energy became the first priests, their minds expanded beyond mortal limits, their bodies marked with luminescent sigils that pulsed in rhythm with the planet's heartbeat. From these primal beginnings, the first warrior orders emerged. Each tribe contributed its strongest fighters to form bands of elite guardians who protected the Wraith temples from rival clans and native predators. These proto-sentinels developed complex martial traditions, passing techniques from generation to generation, through ritual combat and symbolic scarification. Their weapons, initially crafted from meteoric iron and volcanic glass, were consecrated in wraith energy, giving them properties beyond mere physical damage. For thousands of years, this cycle continued. Tribes fought for dominance, priests interpreted wraith visions, and warrior bands evolved increasingly sophisticated combat methods. The balance of power shifted constantly, with no single tribe able to claim planetary dominance. But beneath these surface conflicts, a deeper unity was forming, a shared spiritual language that transcended tribal divisions. All acknowledged the wraiths as supreme beings. All recognized the sacred duty to protect these entities from unknown threats that might someday emerge from beyond their world. This prophecy of external danger, present in the earliest wraith communications, prepared the cultural soil for what would come next. The Makers did not arrive as conquerors, but as fulfillment. When their luminous forms first descended from the crimson skies, the tribe priests immediately recognized them as the bright guardians, long foretold in wraith visions. The Maker emissaries, their elongated forms radiating celestial light, spoke directly into the minds of the gathered priests, their telepathic communications bypassing language barriers to implant concepts of cosmic order and divine hierarchy directly into receptive consciousness. The Khan Maker herself appeared before the assembled tribal leaders at the largest wraith temple, a massive structure of cyclopean stones arranged in concentric circles around a chasm of perpetual fire. Her form, more radiant and terrible than her subordinates, inspired such awe that many warriors cast aside their weapons and fell prostrate upon the ground. She spoke of a great purpose for which the people of Argent Denur had been prepared across countless generations. She named them Sentinels, guardians not merely of the wraiths, but of cosmic order itself. Under Maker guidance, the fractured tribes united for the first time in their bloody history. The strongest warriors from each clan were selected to form the first true Knight Sentinel order, an elite fighting force that would serve as both military vanguard and religious exemplars. These chosen warriors underwent rituals of purification and enhancement, their bodies and minds strengthened through exposure to concentrated wraith energy. They emerged transformed, taller, stronger, longer-lived than their brethren, capable of wielding weapons and armor that would crush ordinary mortals beneath their weight. The Knight Sentinels became the iron fist of a rapidly evolving civilization. With Maker knowledge accelerating their development, the people of Argent Denur advanced more in a single generation than in the previous 1,000 years. Crude settlements grew into magnificent cities of stone and metal, their architecture blending native aesthetics with Maker geometric principles. Tribal shamans transformed into organized priesthoods, their rituals standardized and aligned with Maker theological frameworks. Rudimentary metallurgy evolved into sophisticated materials science, producing alloys that channeled wraith energy with unprecedented efficiency. At the center of this cultural transformation stood the Sentinel Temple, a structure that dwarfed all previous sacred sites on the planet. Built atop the largest wraith chasm, the temple rose in 7 tiers of increasing sanctity, its outer walls emblazoned with the histories of the unified tribes, its inner chambers reserved for rituals too sacred for common knowledge. At the temple's peak, a perpetual flame burned with the combined essence of wraith energy and Maker, blessing a symbolic representation of the covenant between mortal warriors and cosmic overseers. The Knight Sentinels established their headquarters within the temple complex, transforming from loosely affiliated warbands into a rigidly hierarchical military order. Their training grounds occupied the 3rd-tier vast courtyards, where combat techniques were perfected through relentless practice and live-fire exercises. Their armory filled the 4th-tier forges and workshops, where specialized weapons were crafted for each warrior according to their proven aptitudes. Their reliquary dominated the 5th tier, a repository of sacred artifacts and trophies from the emerging Sentinel campaigns across their world and beyond. For the Makers did not intend the Sentinels to remain confined to Argent Denur. As the unified civilization stabilized, the Khan Maker revealed the next phase of her grand design: expansion. Other worlds existed within reach, some inhabited by beings who might be brought into the light of Maker guidance, others populated by entities that threatened cosmic balance. The Sentinels would serve as the vanguard of this expansionary mission, carrying the combined banner of Wraith energy and Maker wisdom to distant stars. To facilitate this cosmic campaign, the Makers introduced the concept of dimensional gates technologies that could fold space-time to create passages between worlds. The first such portal was constructed within the 6th tier of the Sentinel Temple, a massive arch of exotic materials that hummed with energies beyond mortal comprehension. When activated by combined Wraith and Maker power, the gate could open pathways to targeted worlds, allowing Sentinel forces to deploy without the delays of conventional space travel. The initial expeditions were tentative, small squads of elite Night Sentinels, accompanied by Maker observers, venturing to nearby worlds for limited reconnaissance missions. But as confidence in the portal technology grew, so did the scale and scope of Sentinel operations. Within what might be measured as centuries by Earth standards, the warriors of Argent D'Nur had established presence on dozens of worlds, bringing some into peaceful alliance and subjugating others through overwhelming military force. With each successful campaign, the legend of the Night Sentinels grew. Their distinctive armor, a fusion of tribal symbolism, and advanced metallurgy became recognized and feared across dimensions. Their combat prowess elevated from impressive to seemingly supernatural. Their bodies and weapons enhanced by continuous exposure to Wraith energy and Maker blessing. Their fortress temples, constructed on conquered worlds to mirror the sacred architecture of their homeworld, served as anchors for an expanding empire, united under the banner of righteous strength. Throughout this period of expansion, the Sentinel civilization developed increasingly complex social and military structures. The original Night Sentinels, those first warriors chosen from the unified tribes, became legendary figures whose bloodlines formed the basis for a new nobility. Their descendants inherited not only titles and properties but spiritual authority, their connection to the founding warriors conferring legitimacy that transcended military rank. Beneath this warrior aristocracy, specialized castes emerged. The priests who tended Wraith shrines, the craftsmen who forged weapons and armor, the scholars who preserved knowledge of conquered worlds, and the common citizens who supported the war machine through labor and resources. The military hierarchy grew similarly elaborate. The Night Sentinels remained the elite core, but subsidiary orders formed to handle specialized tasks. The Dawn Guard, who maintained defensive fortifications, the Twilight Rangers, who performed reconnaissance on untamed worlds, the Midnight Hunters, who tracked and eliminated threats to Wraith energy sources. Each order developed distinctive armor, weapons, and combat methodologies, creating a military ecosystem of complementary strengths unified by shared spiritual purpose. Central to all these developments was the continuous refinement of Argent energy, the synthesis of Wraith power that fueled Sentinel technology and enhanced their warriors. Under Maker direction, the priests developed increasingly sophisticated methods of harvesting and concentrating this energy. The original Wraith chasms were enclosed within containment structures that maximized output while minimizing waste. Distribution networks carried refined energy to every corner of Sentinel territory, powering everything from the smallest personal shield to the largest dimensional gate. The secrets of generating and manipulating Argent energy were closely guarded, known only to the highest ranks of the priesthood and their Maker overseers. Common Sentinels understood it as a blessed force, the physical manifestation of Wraith and Maker favor combined. They witnessed its effects in the godlike strength it granted their champions, the seemingly miraculous technologies it powered, the protective barriers it generated around their cities and temples. What they could not comprehend was the complex metaphysical exchange occurring behind the veil of religious ceremony, the carefully balanced equation of energy transfer that sustained not only their civilization but increasingly the realm of Urdak itself. For as Sentinel society advanced under Maker guidance, a subtle dependency formed in the opposite direction. The Khan Maker, in her efforts to forestall Urdak's entropy, had bound her realm's sustainability to the continuous flow of Argent energy. What began as supplementary support became essential nourishment. The machinery of Sentinel expansion, their conquests, their harvesting of resources from multiple worlds, their continuous refinement of energy production served Urdak's needs as much as their own glory. This symbiotic relationship remained invisible to all but the highest echelons of both civilizations, concealed beneath layers of religious doctrine and mystical terminology. The zenith of Sentinel achievement came with the creation of Atlan, a massive artificial world constructed at a dimensional nexus point. where multiple realities intersected. Built using technologies and materials gathered from a dozen conquered planets, Atlan served as both military headquarters and spiritual center for the expanding Sentinel domains. Its architecture dwarfed even the Great Temple on Argent D'Nur, with specialized districts dedicated to each aspect of their civilization, training grounds that could accommodate thousands of warriors simultaneously, forges that never cooled, libraries containing wisdom from hundreds of worlds, and at its center, a dimensional gate large enough to transport entire armies. Atlan represented the perfect fusion of Sentinel martial tradition and Maker cosmic vision, a statement of power visible across dimensions, a monument to ordered conquest. The Khan Maker herself blessed its completion in a ceremony attended by every high-ranking Sentinel and priest. Standing before the assembled elite of their joint civilizations, she proclaimed a new age of expansion and enlightenment, a future where the combined might of Argent D'Nur and Urdak would bring order to the chaos of creation. What remained unspoken during these triumphant declarations was the true purpose behind such unprecedented mobilization. For all their achievements, all their conquests, all their advancements, the Sentinels remained ignorant of the dimension that increasingly occupied the Khan Maker's attention. The existence of Hell, the chaotic realm of perpetual consumption and corruption, remained known only to select Makris and the highest priests of the Wraith temples. The threat it posed to ordered dimensions was presented as abstract and distant, a problem for the gods to manage, while mortal warriors focused on more comprehensible enemies. In truth, the Khan Maker had been engaged in careful, secret communication with Hell's hierarchy since before the Sentinel campaigns began. These negotiations, conducted through specialized proxies in dimensional buffer zones, centered around a proposition as ambitious as it was dangerous: a controlled exchange of energy and souls that would benefit both realms, while preventing open conflict. Hell would receive a steady supply of mortal essence from condemned worlds, carefully selected for their corruption or cosmic insignificance. In exchange, Hell would provide access to its unique energies that, when properly refined and filtered through Wraith power, would produce Argent energy of unprecedented potency. This blasphemous covenant required elaborate concealment. The Khan Maker established a specialized order of Makers dedicated to managing Hell communications, their very existence unknown to the broader population of Urdak. On the Sentinel side, she elevated certain priests to forbidden knowledge, binding them with oaths that rewrote their very souls to prevent betrayal. These Deegs, as they came to be called, served as intermediaries between dimensions, their modified consciousness capable of withstanding exposure to Hell's corruption while maintaining loyalty to the greater purpose. To the Night Sentinels and the general population of the Sentinel worlds, the continuous expansion of their empire was presented as a holy mission, bringing enlightenment to worthy civilizations and righteous conquest to those who resisted. The increasing focus on energy production and soul manipulation was framed as necessary advancement of their divine technology. The occasional disappearance of entire populations from conquered territories was attributed to resettlement programs or unfortunate casualties of resistance. For many generations of Sentinel history, this elaborate deception maintained its integrity. The warriors fought their battles, the priests conducted their rituals, the citizens enjoyed unprecedented prosperity and security, all while the machinery of cosmic betrayal operated in the shadows of their glorious empire. Those who glimpsed fragments of the truth were quickly identified by the Deegs, and either brought into the inner circle of complicity or eliminated as threats to cosmic order. But no deception, however elaborate, can withstand the corrosive power of Hell indefinitely. The first cracks appeared not in dramatic revelations, but subtle anomalies. Veteran Night Sentinels, returning from distant campaigns, reported encounters with entities that matched no known species in the catalogued dimensions: twisted, flesh-warped creatures that fought with unnatural aggression and dissolved into sulfurous mist when slain. Priests monitoring Wraith energy flows detected momentary fluctuations, microsecond disruptions that suggested interference from an unknown source. Scholars compiling histories of conquered worlds noticed patterns of corruption that preceded Sentinel arrival civilizations that had begun deteriorating through means that defied conventional understanding. These disparate observations remained isolated incidents, dismissed as curiosities, or classified as restricted knowledge by the Deegs. But within the collective consciousness of the Night Sentinels warriors, whose spiritual sensitivity had been heightened through generations of wraith energy exposure, an intuitive disquiet began to grow. Their ancestral purpose, embedded in tribal memory since before Maker arrival, had always centered on protection against external threats to the wraiths. This instinctive mandate, temporarily redirected toward expansion and conquest, began reasserting itself in the form of questions and suspicions. Among the elite warriors, whispered conversations began in private chambers, discussions of inconsistencies in official accounts, comparisons of unusual encounters on different worlds, speculation about the increasingly restricted areas within temples, and the strange rituals conducted by the highest priests. Most remained loyal to the established order, interpreting their doubts as tests of faith to be overcome through renewed dedication. But some began unauthorized investigations, using their considerable status and access to probe regions of knowledge officially forbidden to even high-ranking sentinels. These tensions might have remained manageable internal matters had external events not forced acceleration of the Khan Maker's plans. The signs of Urdak's entropy, temporarily held at bay through the influx of Argent energy, began manifesting with renewed intensity. The father's communications became increasingly fragmented, his once continuous presence now fluctuating unpredictably. The scheduled transfiguration cycle, already delayed beyond all precedent, could no longer be postponed without risking fundamental collapse of Maker continuity. Faced with this existential deadline, the Khan Maker determined that incremental energy extraction could no longer sustain Urdak's needs. A more direct, more substantial source was required, one that would necessitate a fundamental transformation of the arrangements with both Hell and the Sentinel worlds. The plans for this transformation, developed in secret by the most trusted Deegs and Maker specialists, involved a radical redesign of energy extraction systems and a significant expansion of the territories allocated for Hell's consumption. As preparations for this new phase accelerated, security around sensitive operations intensified. More Night Sentinels were assigned to guard duties at energy facilities rather than frontier campaigns. Civilian access to temple complexes became increasingly restricted. The Deegs appeared more frequently at military installations, conducting inspections and rituals that even high-ranking commanders were forbidden to witness. These changes, presented as necessary precautions against unspecified threats, only deepened the growing undercurrent of suspicion among the warrior elite. It was during this period of mounting tension that an unprecedented event occurred, one that would ultimately reshape the cosmic balance and reveal the hidden corruption at the heart of the Maker-Sentinel alliance. On a routine patrol of dimensional boundaries, a squad of Night Sentinels encountered a solitary figure near an unauthorized energy anomaly. The figure was humanoid but clearly not of Sentinel origin, clad in damaged armor of unknown design, surrounded by the corpses of creatures that resembled no known species in catalogued dimensions. The Night Sentinels approached with weapons ready, expecting resistance from this blood-covered intruder. Instead, the stranger collapsed from exhaustion and injury, surrendering to their authority without struggle. When they removed his damaged helmet, they discovered a being similar to themselves in basic form but alien in detail, a human soldier from a dimension previously unknown to Sentinel exploration. His eyes, though clouded with pain, burned with a rage that transcended language barriers. Following protocol for dimensional anomalies, the Sentinels transported this curious outsider to the nearest garrison for examination and interrogation. Initial communication proved difficult, his language sharing no common root with Sentinel dialects. But as the priests utilized psychic techniques to extract surface memories, a fragmentary narrative emerged: a military facility on a red planet, unexpected energy experiments, the sudden manifestation of monstrous entities, desperate combat against overwhelming numbers, the slaughter of colleagues, and finally, an accidental transition through a collapsing dimensional rift. The creatures he had fought, the methods of their attack, their physical characteristics, all aligned with classified knowledge of demonic entities from the forbidden dimension. This presented the Sentinel authorities with an immediate crisis. A being from an unknown world had encountered Hell forces and survived, suggesting an unauthorized incursion had occurred outside the carefully managed protocols established by the Khan Maker's covenant. While the Deegs argued for immediate termination of this potential complication, Certain Night Sentinel commanders saw different significance in the stranger's arrival. Here was a warrior who had faced the unknown enemy their ancestors had prepared for, who had fought the corruptive forces their oldest traditions had warned against. Moreover, his combat abilities demonstrated in the scene of his discovery suggested potential value beyond mere curiosity. The commander of the garrison, bypassing normal channels of authorization, ordered the human transferred to Argent D'Nur for further assessment. Thus arrived on the sacred homeworld of the Sentinels, a figure who would eventually shatter the foundations of their civilization and bring judgment upon the architects of cosmic betrayal. His name, unpronounceable in Sentinel tongue, would eventually be abandoned in favor of a title earned through blood and fury. But in this moment, as he stood before Sentinel judgment, a solitary survivor from a doomed world, unaware of his cosmic significance, he was merely an anomaly, a curiosity, a potential asset to be evaluated. None could foresee that this unremarkable human soldier would become the instrument of Hell's greatest defeat and the catalyst for Urdak's final reckoning. None could anticipate that this stranger, this outlander, would transcend his mortal limitations to become the terror of demons across all dimensions. None could know that they were witnessing the arrival of the being who would one day be known by many names across many worlds, but most frequently and fearfully as the Doomslayer. The wheel of fate completed another turn. The corruption festering within the alliance of Makers and Sentinels had produced its own nemesis. And in the sacred chambers of Argent D'Nur, as the human stranger began his integration into Sentinel society, the path toward apocalypse was irrevocably set. Beneath the veneer of sacred order, a blasphemous bargain forged in desperation would doom worlds unnumbered. In the darkened chambers beneath Urdak's luminous spires, far from the gaze of lesser makers, the Khan Maker knelt before a specialized dimensional aperture. Unlike the majestic portals that connected sanctioned realms, this gateway was small, heavily shielded, and designed for communication rather than transit. Its edges pulsed with containment energies, safeguards against contamination from what lay beyond. The Khan Maker's elongated fingers traced complex patterns in the air before the portal, each gesture unlocking layers of metaphysical encryption until the barrier between dimensions thinned to transparent membrane. Through this veil, she beheld her counterpart, the entity known in its realm as the Dark Lord, ruler of hell and architect of endless consumption. His form shifted continuously, refusing to settle on a single appearance, though certain elements remained constant. Eyes of molten gold that burned with cold calculation. A crown of twisted matter that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Limbs that seemed simultaneously flesh and energy. When he spoke, his voice resonated not through air but through the fabric of reality itself, each word a minor distortion in the cosmic order. The arrangement proceeds too slowly, the Dark Lord observed, his tone neither angry nor pleased but precisely measured. Your harvesting methods remain inefficient, your distribution networks waste potential. Your sentinel pawns consume energy that could serve greater purpose. The Khan Maker maintained perfect composure, her luminous face betraying no emotion. The parameters were established with careful consideration. Acceleration risks detection by my subjects, by the sentinels, by the Father himself. The balance must be maintained. Balance, the Dark Lord repeated, the word itself seeming to warp in his utterance. A maker concept with no relevance to cosmic reality. There is only consumption or dissolution. Your realm faces the latter without sufficient embrace of the former. This truth, though couched in Hell's merciless perspective, could not be denied. The Khan Maker had received the latest measurements of Urdak's deterioration hidden from most of her kind, but evident to her enhanced perception. The entropy that threatened their perfect realm accelerated despite the current flow of Argent energy. The transfiguration cycle, already delayed beyond all precedent, loomed with increased urgency. Without substantial intervention, she would face dissolution into the Father's consciousness, and a new Khan would emerge, one who might discover and dismantle the arrangements she had established. What do you propose? She asked, knowing the answer would be unpalatable yet necessary. The Dark Lord's form momentarily stabilized, adopting an appearance that mirrored the Khan Maker's own, a perversion of her divine symmetry rendered in negative space. Direct access to mortal realms. Unfiltered soul energy. A more equitable division of conquered dimensions. Impossible. The Covenant restricts your forces to designated territories. Direct predation would alert the Sentinel forces to your existence and our arrangement. Then create a more efficient system, the Dark Lord countered. Your Argent energy synthesis wastes the potential of both Wraith and Hell essence. Our scholars have developed methods that would triple yield while maintaining necessary concealment. The Khan Maker hesitated, aware of the implicit danger. Hell's scholars, demonic entities that specialized in energy corruption and soul manipulation, were notoriously deceptive. Yet their understanding of essence extraction exceeded even Maker knowledge. Their entire civilization built upon the efficient rendering of conquered realms into consumable power. Provide the specifications, she finally conceded. My specialists will evaluate their safety and compatibility with Urdak's needs. The Dark Lord's form rippled with what might have been satisfaction. The knowledge has already been transmitted to your Deeg priests. Implementation should begin immediately. This presumptuous action transferring forbidden knowledge directly to her mortal servants violated protocol, yet the Khan Maker suppressed her indignation. Time grew short. Cosmic necessities outweighed procedural proprieties. Very well, but the fundamental covenant remains. Your forces operate only where permitted, take only what is allocated, and remain unknown to the broader Sentinel forces. For now, the Dark Lord agreed, the qualification hanging ominous between dimensions. But know this, Luminous One, your realm's survival now depends upon Hell's cooperation. The balance of our arrangement shifts with each cycle of your deterioration. With that reality acknowledged, the communication ended. The Khan Maker sealed the portal with elaborate gestures, each movement reinforcing the barriers between Urdak and Hell. When the aperture finally closed, she remained kneeling in contemplation, her divine mind calculating probabilities and consequences with processing power beyond mortal comprehension. The path forward narrowed with each decision, the options for Urdak's preservation becoming increasingly compromised. Yet the alternative acceptance of Urdak's entropy and her own transfiguration remained unthinkable. Across dimensions, in chambers deep beneath Sentinel temples on Argent Denur, the Deeg priests received Hell's forbidden knowledge through dreams of burning mathematics and visions of impossible machinery. They awakened with minds expanded and corrupted, their understanding of energy manipulation fundamentally altered. Without conscious decision, they began sketching designs for new extraction systems, their hands guided by inspiration not entirely their own. The first modifications to Wraith energy collectors began within days, implemented under the guise of efficiency improvements, their true purpose known only to those already compromised by the Covenant of Shadows. Hell itself existed in a state of perpetual transformation, its landscapes reshaping according to the whims of its rulers and the metaphysical laws of consumption. At the center of this ever-shifting realm stood Imora, the ancient citadel of the Dark Lord and seat of Hell's power. Unlike the chaotic territories that surrounded it, Imora maintained relative stability, its massive walls formed from the compressed essence of conquered dimensions, its towers rising into a sky of fire and void. Within this fortress, the Dark Lord gathered his principal lieutenants' entities that had existed since Hell's inception, their forms and names changing across eons, while their fundamental nature remained constant. The Maker grows desperate, he informed the assembled hierarchy, his current form massive and armored, befitting a war council. Her realm deteriorates despite our contributions. She will accept greater concessions as necessity increases. The assembled lords of Hell, each a cosmic horror in their own right, received this information with varied responses. Some manifested pleasure through eruptions of flame or spontaneous generation of lesser demons. Others maintained calculating silence, their ancient minds evaluating implications across multiple dimensional vectors. The Sentinel worlds remain problematic, observed one lieutenant, his form composed of interlinked vertebrae and pulsing organs. Their warriors grow stronger with each campaign. Their instinctive hostility toward our kind cannot be permanently suppressed. If they discover our covenant with the Makers, they are sheep guided by corrupted shepherds, the Dark Lord dismissed. The Deegs control their information, direct their campaigns, interpret their sacred texts. By the time the common warriors recognize truth, the critical worlds will already be processed. Another lord raised objection. her voice resonating from multiple mouths across a crystalline form. The Wraith energy remains incompletely understood. Our attempts to replicate it independently have failed. We remain dependent on the Maker's processing systems. A temporary limitation, the Dark Lord assured. Each cycle brings more knowledge, more souls, more essence. The new extraction methods will provide unprecedented access to Sentinel power sources. In time, we will no longer require Maker cooperation, only Maker submission. The Council concluded with assignments distributed among Hell's hierarchy, specific responsibilities for managing the expanded Covenant, territories to prepare for eventual consumption, demonic legions to position near dimensional boundaries for the anticipated acceleration. The Dark Lord's strategy unfolded across multiple timelines simultaneously, each contingency calculated to maximize Hell's advantage, regardless of how events progressed. Whether the Maker-Sentinel alliance maintained its integrity or collapsed into chaos, Hell would feast on the outcome. Meanwhile, on worlds distant from these cosmic negotiations, the consequences of the Covenant manifested in mounting horror. The planets designated for Hell's consumption, carefully selected for their spiritual corruption or strategic insignificance, experienced accelerating deterioration. What began as subtle disturbances in natural order progressed to reality breakdown as the boundaries between dimensions thinned under systematic weakening. The pattern repeated with terrible consistency. First came dreams, collective nightmares that plagued entire populations, filling their sleep with visions of fire and transformation. Then followed atmospheric changes, skies tinted red, temperatures rising inexplicably, electrical storms of increasing intensity, social structures degraded, next violence erupting without apparent cause, religious manias sweeping through communities, mass disappearances attributed to various causes but never accurately explained. In the final phases, physical laws themselves began failing matter, spontaneously transmuting, living tissue, fusing with inorganic materials, gravity fluctuating in patterns that spelled doom in demonic script. By the time visible rifts appeared in reality, tears in the dimensional fabric that leaked hell essence into mortal realms, the affected worlds were already lost. These final incursions served merely to complete the consumption process, demonic entities manifesting to harvest whatever remained of civilization and convert the planet's core energies to Hell's use. The conquered territories left behind existed as extensions of Hell itself, blasted landscapes of rock and fire, where new demonic entities gestated in pools of corrupted essence, ready to join the endless legions of consumption. To maintain the Covenant's secrecy, these doomed worlds were carefully isolated from Sentinel patrol routes and communication networks. The Deegs manipulated military deployments to ensure no Night Sentinel forces encountered active consumption zones. When questions arose about previously documented planets that had fallen silent, explanations were provided: natural disasters, civil wars, plague outbreaks, or simply clerical errors in dimensional cataloging. The warriors accepted these accounts with decreasing credulity, but in the strict hierarchy of Sentinel society, the Deegs' authority remained difficult to challenge openly. Yet, with each consumed world, with each acceleration of the extraction process, the barriers of secrecy thinned, along with the dimensional boundaries. Incidents multiplied across the expanding territories of the Sentinel Empire: patrol units encountering dimensional anomalies, communication relays detecting unknown energy signatures, frontier garrisons reporting sightings of entities that matched no recorded species. These reports, diligently submitted through official channels, disappeared into classified archives or returned with explanations that satisfied protocol but not the instincts of veteran warriors. Among the Night Sentinels, whispered conversations continued, gradually coalescing into unofficial investigations. Small groups of trusted comrades compared experiences, collected unauthorized data, even conducted discreet examinations of sites where anomalies had been reported. These activities, technically treasonous under Sentinel military law, were concealed beneath impeccable service records and outward demonstrations of faith in the established order. The warriors proceeded with extreme caution, aware that direct challenge to Maker authority or Deeg interpretation would result in immediate censure or worse. The catalyst for escalation came from an unexpected source: the Outlander. The human soldier discovered near the dimensional anomaly had been integrated into Sentinel society through a combination of pragmatic necessity and cultural curiosity. His combat abilities, proven first in the circumstances of his discovery and later in controlled assessments, earned him provisional status within the military hierarchy. His alien perspective provided valuable insights on tactical matters, offering approaches unconsidered by warriors trained exclusively in Sentinel traditions. Initially isolated by language and custom, the Outlander gradually adapted to his new reality. He learned the Sentinel tongue through a combination of formal instruction and battlefield immersion. He studied their combat techniques while introducing modifications based on his previous military training. He observed their religious practices with the detachment of one raised in a different faith, noting inconsistencies and contradictions invisible to lifelong believers. His outsider status, once a barrier, became a unique vantage point from which to perceive the structure of Sentinel society with unusual clarity. The Night Sentinels assigned to monitor his integration reported a warrior of exceptional focus and barely contained rage. His combat effectiveness stemmed not from Sentinel discipline but from a personal fury that transcended dimensional displacement. When finally granted limited access to Sentinel historical archives, he focused obsessively on accounts of dimensional anomalies and unusual entities, searching for connections to his own experience. When permitted to join minor campaigns against frontier threats, he demonstrated a particular ferocity against opponents that exhibited even slight resemblance to the creatures he had encountered before his transition to Argent d'Honneur. The Outlander's fixation on these matters eventually intersected with the quiet concerns of certain Night Sentinels. During a campaign against insurgents on a recently conquered world, a veteran commander named Valen observed the humans' reaction to discovering unusual symbols carved into underground chambers. The markings, geometrically precise yet disturbing to view directly, provoked an immediate recognition response. The Outlander identified them as identical to signs he had witnessed during the attack on his original facility, moments before the appearance of the monstrous entities that slaughtered his colleagues. This connection between events, separated by dimensional boundaries, yet sharing specific symbolic elements, provided the first concrete evidence of a pattern beyond coincidence. Valen, already among those harboring suspicions about Deeg activities, made the fateful decision to share certain classified information with the Outlander. In private chambers, secured against surveillance, he revealed fragmented reports of similar symbols discovered on other worlds, always in locations later quarantined by direct Deeg order and removed from standard documentation. The human's response was transformative. What had been personal rage crystallized into focused purpose. His fractured narrative of individual trauma expanded into recognition of a larger pattern, one that suggested coordinated incursions across multiple dimensions by the same entities that had destroyed his original world. With Valen's guarded assistance, he began correlating data points, locations of reported anomalies, timing of unexplained communication blackouts, movements of Deeg priests relative to subsequent changes in patrol routes. The pattern that emerged confirmed the worst suspicions of the dissident Sentinels. Something systematic was occurring beyond their official awareness, something that involved dimensional boundaries being compromised according to some predetermined schedule. The Deegs appeared not merely aware of these events, but actively involved in their coordination, their movements anticipating breaches rather than responding to them. Most disturbing, these activities had accelerated, notably in recent times, with increasing resources diverted to classified projects under direct Micah authority. This revelation forced a critical decision upon Valen and his trusted circle. The evidence suggested corruption at the highest levels of their society, a violation of everything the Night Sentinels stood for as protectors of cosmic order. Yet direct confrontation remained suicidal given the power differential between common warriors and the Maker Deeg authority structure. Even presenting their findings through official channels would likely result in immediate suppression and punishment. The Outlander proposed a third approach, direct investigation of a predicted breach site, bypassing the chain of command entirely. Based on their compiled data, a remote outpost on the fringes of Sentinel territory showed multiple indicators of imminent anomaly, unusual energy readings, specialized equipment transfers, scheduled absence of regular patrol units. If they could witness directly what occurred at such locations, they would have irrefutable evidence to present to the broader Sentinel leadership. Valen approved this dangerous plan with reluctance. selecting only his most trusted warriors to accompany the Outlander on what was officially documented as a training exercise in dimensional navigation. Their small vessel departed from the Central Fleet with routine clearances, its actual destination known only to those aboard. The selected site, a monitoring station on a desolate moon, appeared abandoned upon their arrival, though internal systems remained operational and recent activity was evident in the command logs. Following energy signatures to the deepest level of the facility, the unsanctioned expedition discovered what generations of careful deception had concealed from the Sentinel forces: a fully operational Hell portal. Unlike the dimensional gates used for legitimate Sentinel transportation, this construct radiated malevolent purpose. Its frame was inscribed with the same disturbing symbols previously identified. Its energy signature pulsed with frequencies that induced instinctive revulsion in the Sentinel warriors. Most damning, the control systems bore the unmistakable markings of both Deeg priesthood and demonic influence combined, proving cooperation rather than conflict between forces allegedly opposed. As the expedition documented this blasphemous discovery, the portal activated. The sudden surge of Hell energy temporarily disabled their recording equipment, but what transpired remained seared into the memory of every witness. The dimensional barrier thinned to transparency, revealing a hellscape beyond comprehension, a realm of fire and tortured flesh, where mountains of skulls rose from lakes of blood, where twisted architectures defied physical laws, where entities of pure malevolence moved with terrible purpose. From this nightmare emerged a procession, lesser demons herding captive souls toward enormous processing structures, followed by larger entities overseeing the operation, and finally, a delegation of higher demons, escorting three familiar figures, Deeg priests, their sacred vestments, now adorned with unholy symbols, their movements synchronized with their demonic counterparts in practiced coordination. The Deegs supervised the transfer of contained soul essence from the Hell dimension to specialized receptacles bearing Sentinel markings, their expressions showing neither disgust nor reluctance, but the satisfaction of experienced professionals conducting routine business. The Outlander reacted with predictable fury, requiring physical restraint by Valen himself to prevent premature engagement that would have proved suicidal against such opposition. The Sentinel commander, though equally enraged by this confirmation of treachery, recognized the strategic necessity of returning with their evidence, rather than dying in a hopeless attack. With discipline born from centuries of warfare, he ordered immediate withdrawal, prioritizing the intelligence they had gathered over the temporary satisfaction of confrontation. Their return journey proved more perilous than anticipated. Alert systems triggered by their unauthorized presence at the facility sent automated notifications through channels monitored by the Deegs. Pursuit vessels were dispatched with orders to intercept the rogue transport, allegedly compromised by dimensional contamination, a pretext that would justify its destruction without specific explanation. Only the exceptional skill of the Night Sentinel pilots and their intimate knowledge of patrol patterns allowed them to evade capture long enough to reach Sentinel Prime, the capital city of Argent Danur, where the full council of commanders maintained headquarters. The evidence they presented to the assembled leadership shattered the foundations of Sentinel society. Recordings of the Hell portal, samples of the hybrid Deeg demonic technology, correlation data showing the pattern of hidden operations across multiple worlds. These revelations could not be dismissed or explained away through traditional doctrinal channels. The existence of Hell as a distinct dimensional entity, the active collaboration between Deeg priests and demonic forces, the systematic processing of souls for energy production, each element contradicted the fundamental beliefs upon which the Sentinel Empire had been built. The immediate response was martial. The Council ordered the arrest of all Deeg priests, the lockdown of temple facilities, the recall of fleet elements to defensive positions around core Sentinel worlds. These commands, transmitted through secured channels, reached most intended recipients, but not before countermeasures activated. The Deegs, prepared for eventual discovery, implemented contingency protocols that had been embedded within Sentinel command systems for generations. Communications became unreliable. Weapon systems failed at critical junctions. Dimensional gates recalibrated to unexpected coordinates or shut down entirely. As confusion spread through the Sentinel military, the Khan Maker herself appeared before the Council, not in physical form, but as a projected presence of overwhelming authority. Her message combined reassurance with subtle threat. The situation had been misinterpreted by well-meaning but limited mortal minds. The interactions with the other dimension represented necessary cosmic maintenance beyond Sentinel comprehension. The captured visuals showed not hell, but a quarantine zone for corrupted energies. She requested patience, compliance, and most importantly, the surrender of the instigators, particularly the Outlander, whose alien nature had clearly disrupted proper understanding of Maker-guided operations. The Council fractured under this intervention. Some commanders, their faith in Maker divinity unshakable despite evidence, advocated immediate compliance. Others, swayed by the testimony of respected warriors like Valen, demanded further investigation before surrender. A third faction counseled strategic delay, neither direct opposition nor immediate acquiescence, until broader consensus could be established among the Night Sentinel forces scattered across multiple worlds. In this, a moment of unprecedented division, the Outlander himself stepped forward to address the assembled leadership. Though lacking the formal authority of Sentinel Command, his unique perspective as both victim and witness carried special weight in the unfolding crisis. Speaking in the Sentinel tongue he had mastered through determination, he detailed the destruction of his original world, the sudden invasion of demonic entities through portals identical to those documented, the systematic slaughter of his colleagues, the clear evidence that these incursions followed established patterns, rather than random dimensional accidents. "I have witnessed the face of the enemy you were created to fight," he concluded, his voice resonating with controlled fury. "The same enemy now welcomed by your priests, sanctioned by your gods, permitted to devour worlds while you conquer in blind faith. I did not cross dimensions by choice, but having arrived in your realm, having fought alongside your warriors, having seen the corruption beneath your glory, I cannot remain silent. If you are truly Sentinel's guardians against the dark, then face the darkness that now dwells among you." This appeal, delivered without political calculation or religious framing, catalyzed the growing sentiment among the warrior class. The Night Sentinels had been created for a specific purpose: protection against external threats to cosmic order. If their highest authorities had compromised that purpose through unholy alliances, then loyalty to the original mandate superseded obedience to corrupted leadership. Individual commanders began pledging support not to the fractured council, but directly to the cause of investigation and purification. The Khan Maker, perceiving the shift in momentum, withdrew her projected presence with a final warning. Interference with divine operations would necessitate reassessment of the Sentinel Maker Covenant, with consequences beyond mortal comprehension. This threat, intended to restore compliance through fear, instead confirmed the suspicions now spreading rapidly through the command structure. Orders and counter-orders cascaded through the communication networks as different factions attempted to secure key assets and strategic positions. In the mounting chaos, Valen made a decisive tactical choice. Rather than engaging in the developing civil conflict or awaiting formal resolution from the divided council, he assembled a strike force of absolutely trusted Night Sentinels warriors whose loyalty to the original Sentinel purpose outweighed all other considerations. To this elite unit he added the Outlander, whose knowledge of Hell's operations and singular focus on their destruction made him invaluable despite his foreign origin. Their mission, undertaken without official sanction, but with the tacit support of key commanders, targeted the most concrete evidence of corruption, the Hell portal they had discovered. The facility, now heavily reinforced with both Deeg loyalists and summoned demonic entities, presented a formidable objective. The strike force approached through a tangential dimension, bypassing expected defensive perimeters, emerging directly within the installation through navigational calculations provided by sympathetic Sentinel scientists. What followed was combat of unprecedented intensity. Veteran Night Sentinels, facing demonic opposition on material planes where such confrontation had never been officially acknowledged. At the forefront of this assault fought the Outlander. Whatever remarkable combat abilities he had demonstrated previously paled against his performance when directly engaging the entities responsible for his original world's destruction. Witnesses would later struggle to describe the fluid brutality of his fighting style, a hybrid methodology that combined Sentinel techniques with movements never seen in their training chambers. where disciplined Sentinel warriors maintained formation and tactical coherence, the Outlander became a singular vector of destruction, moving through demonic ranks with a speed and ferocity that approached supernatural manifestation. The objective was reached, the Hell Portal's control systems captured intact, providing irrefutable evidence of long-term collusion between Maker authorities and Hell's hierarchy. The strike force extracted with this crucial intelligence, despite heavy casualties, the survivors forever changed by direct combat with demonic entities and the revelation of betrayal at cosmic scales. Upon their return to Sentinel space, they found the political situation deteriorated further. Open conflict between loyalist and dissident factions, Deeg priests implementing increasingly desperate containment protocols, and preparations underway for a Maker cleansing force to restore order to their troubled protectorate. The evidence recovered by Valen's strike force, broadcast through emergency channels to all Night Sentinel installations, shattered the last barriers of deniability. The documented history of collaboration between their leadership and the ultimate cosmic enemy, precisely detailed in records spanning centuries, transformed skepticism into certainty and hesitation into rage. The Night Sentinels, created to defend against external threats, now faced the ultimate perversion of their purpose. Their most sacred institutions had been compromised. Their campaigns of conquest had facilitated soul harvesting. Their faith had been weaponized against them. As this revelation spread across Sentinel space, the Khanmaker recognized the collapse of her careful deception. The Covenant of Shadows, maintained through elaborate theological constructs and compartmentalized knowledge, lay exposed to creatures never intended to comprehend its cosmic necessity. The delicate balance between Urdak, Hell, and the Sentinel worlds could no longer be maintained through manipulation alone. The time for subtle influence had passed. The age of direct intervention had begun. Across the Sentinel worlds, dimensional rifts tore open reality, not through gradual weakening, but immediate forced breach. From these gaping wounds in the cosmic order poured Hell's legions, no longer constrained by the Covenant's limitations, but unleashed in full invasive force. Simultaneously, from dimensional apertures rimmed with Maker energy, emerged angelic warriors, never before revealed to Sentinel awareness, specialized combat units, maintained in secret, designed for absolute loyalty to the Khanmaker alone. Between these converging forces, the Night Sentinels faced extermination from both their gods and the enemies they had been created to fight. The First Hell War had begun not through accident or external aggression, but through the inevitable collapse of a cosmic betrayal millennia in the making. The Sentinels, their civilization built upon faith in divine guidance and righteous purpose, now fought with the desperate fury of the deceived. The Makers, their perfect realm dependent upon energies harvested through unholy alliance, now moved to eliminate witnesses to their compromise. The Demons, their expansionary hunger temporarily channeled through calculated arrangement, now feasted without restriction upon worlds previously denied them. And at the center of this cosmic conflagration stood the Outlander, a being never meant to witness these events, whose dimensional displacement had accelerated the unraveling of carefully constructed deceptions. His personal vendetta against the forces that destroyed his world had expanded into a crusade against corruption that spanned multiple realities. In the chaos of collapsing cosmic order, his singular purpose remained unaltered: the destruction of Hell and all who served its hunger. The Covenant of Shadows had produced its own nemesis, a weapon forged in rage, tempered in betrayal, and now unleashed against the architects of cosmic corruption. The wheels of fate accelerated their turning. The age of deception concluded in flames and revelation, and across dimensions, entities of terrible power watched with varied emotion as their grand designs encountered the unpredictable catalyst of human vengeance. From mortal grief to eternal vengeance, the forging of a weapon that Hell itself would learn to fear. The First Hell War erupted across Sentinel space with apocalyptic fury. Dimensional breaches tore through reality on 100 worlds simultaneously, disgorging legions of demonic entities into unprepared populations. Night Sentinel forces, divided by the recent revelations and scattered across their expansive territory, struggled to mount coherent defense against this multi-frontal assault. Communication networks collapsed under targeted corruption. supply lines fractured as transit gates failed or redirected to hostile dimensions. Civilian populations fled toward fortified cities that themselves became besieged islands in seas of advancing corruption. Amid this cosmic cataclysm, a core of resistance formed around leaders who had anticipated the betrayal. Valen, his authority now derived from moral clarity rather than hierarchical position, established a command center within the ancient fortress of Taras Nabad on Argent Denur. From this mountainous stronghold, built long before Maika influence and consequently free of their embedded control systems, he coordinated what forces remained loyal to the original Sentinel purpose: protection against the very threat now materializing across their realm. The surviving Night Sentinels rallied to this banner of resistance, bringing whatever weapons and resources they had secured during the initial chaos. Commanders who had previously disagreed on political and theological matters found unity in the existential struggle against demonic invasion. Scientists who had harbored private doubts about Maker technologies now worked openly to develop countermeasures against Hell's corruption. Even civilian craftsmen contributed their skills, transforming the fortress into a self-sufficient bastion as the surrounding territory fell to corruption. At Valen's right hand stood the Outlander, the human soldier whose presence had catalyzed the unraveling of cosmic deception. In the early phases of the conflict, his combat effectiveness elevated from remarkable to legendary. Where disciplined Sentinel units maintained defensive perimeters through coordinated tactics, the Outlander conducted solo offensives into demon-held territory, returning with intelligence and trophies that defied explanation. His methods violated established Sentinel doctrine but achieved results that could not be dismissed, particularly in a war where conventional approaches proved increasingly inadequate against an enemy that rewrote reality itself. The Night Sentinels, pragmatic in their desperation, began adapting their strategies to incorporate the Outlander's unconventional techniques. Elite warriors trained in traditional formation combat now studied his fluid aggression, his constant movement, his prioritization of targets based on capabilities rather than hierarchical position. Veterans who had initially dismissed him as an undisciplined barbarian now recognized something essential in his approach to demonkind. He fought not with the calculated precision of soldiers, but with the righteous fury of an avenger. Against entities that fed on fear and hesitation, his rage proved uniquely effective. This martial evolution accelerated when the Khan Maker's response to the rebellion materialized. From dimensional apertures rimmed with celestial energy emerged specialized Maker combat units, angelic forms modified for warfare, their luminous bodies encased in armor of impossible materials, their weapons channeling energies beyond mortal comprehension. These were not the beneficent guides who had elevated Sentinel civilization, but executioners deployed to eliminate witnesses to cosmic betrayal. Their attacks targeted Sentinel command structures with precision that suggested intimate knowledge of defensive protocols, knowledge derived from millennia of supposed alliance. Against these celestial assassins, conventional Sentinel tactics proved disastrously ineffective. Warriors who hesitated out of ingrained reverence for Maker divinity perished in flashes of purifying light. Defensive formations calibrated against demonic physiology failed against beings who navigated dimensions as easily as physical space. Even the most hardened veterans found their resolve tested by the psychological impact of fighting entities they had worshipped as gods throughout their lives. The initial encounters resulted in devastating losses among the already depleted Sentinel forces. Once again, it was the Outlander who demonstrated effective countermeasures. Unburdened by theological conditioning, he approached the Maker executioners as simply another enemy to be analyzed and defeated. He observed their attack patterns, identified vulnerabilities in their light-based weaponry, and developed techniques to disrupt their dimensional phasing. Most crucially, he exhibited no reverence or hesitation when engaging these divine entities, only the same focused hatred he directed toward demonic opponents. They bleed, he told the assembled Night Sentinel commanders after returning from an encounter with Maker forces, his armor scorched by energies that should have vaporized mortal tissue. Different from demons, different from you, but they bleed. Anything that bleeds can die. This fundamental insight that their divine betrayers were ultimately destructible transformed the psychological landscape of the conflict. The Night Sentinels, their faith in Maker divinity already shattered by revealed treachery, embraced this final demystification of their former gods. Special units formed to adapt the Outlanders' techniques against celestial opponents, their training focused on overcoming conditioned reverence and exploiting the now identified weaknesses in Maker combat methodology. As the war expanded across dimensions, the Outlanders' integration into Sentinel society deepened beyond military utility. Initially valued solely for his combat abilities, he gradually earned acceptance through shared sacrifice and demonstrated loyalty to the Sentinel cause. Warriors who had viewed him as an alien curiosity now fought alongside him as a brother in arms. Commanders who had questioned his discipline now sought his counsel on tactical matters. His name, unpronounceable in Sentinel language, gave way to honorifics that acknowledged his growing status. Doomwalker, for his habit of bringing catastrophe to demon-held territories, Hellbreaker, for his specialized knowledge of demonic vulnerabilities, and eventually, simply the Slayer, a title that distilled his essential function in the cosmic conflict. This integration reached its most profound expression in the blood ritual of the Night Sentinels. In a ceremony traditionally reserved for those born of Sentinel lineage, the Outlander received the sacred markings of their warrior order brands seared into flesh, with blades heated in flames, kindled from Wraith energy. Each scar represented not merely acceptance into their martial brotherhood, but acknowledgement of specific virtues demonstrated in battle: courage, sacrifice, endurance, righteous fury. That these marks were bestowed upon an otherworlder spoke to how completely the Night Sentinels had transcended their former prejudices in the crucible of existential war. Yet even as the Outlander found belonging among the Sentinel forces, he maintained a certain emotional distance, a core of isolation born from experiences no other could fully comprehend. The Night Sentinels fought to save their civilization. He fought to avenge one already lost. They struggled to reconcile shattered faith with necessary action. He operated from certainties forged in personal apocalypse. They battled alongside comrades, sharing cultural understanding. He carried alone the memory of colleagues whose names would never be spoken in this dimension. This essential solitude deepened when Sentinel scholars, analyzing dimensional data from contested territories, managed to locate the Outlander's origin point in the cosmic web. Scrying technologies, originally developed to track Wraith energy fluctuations, identified a specific Earth in a previously unmapped dimensional cluster. Remote viewing capabilities, deployed at great energy cost, provided fragmentary images of a planet in early stages of demonic corruption. The first tendrils of hell influence spreading from the initial breach point the Outlander had described. A research facility on the red planet of their solar system. The Night Sentinel Council debated intervention, a rescue mission to this distant Earth, potentially saving a civilization from the fate that now consumed their own. Strategic considerations argued against dispersing their already stretched forces to defend a world with no strategic value to the current conflict. Moral arguments countered that preventing Hell's expansion anywhere served their fundamental purpose. Theological perspectives suggested cosmic symmetry in saving the Outlander's people as he now fought to save theirs. Throughout these deliberations, the Outlander himself remained curiously silent, his typical intensity subdued beneath an expression that veteran warriors recognized from battlefield aftermath. The look of one calculating costs already too high to bear. When finally he spoke to the council, his words carried the weight of conclusions reached through private torment. "It's too late," he stated with cold certainty. "The time differential between dimensions. Years have passed there since my displacement. If Hell breached as it did here, Earth is already lost. We fight for worlds that can still be saved." This assessment, delivered without self-pity or hesitation, elevated the Outlander further in Sentinel estimation. To sacrifice vengeance's immediate satisfaction for strategic necessity, to abandon personal attachment for greater purpose, these represented warrior virtues of the highest order in Sentinel philosophy. What none recognized in that moment was the additional burden this knowledge placed upon the already burdened human. Not merely a survivor of tragedy, but now its knowing orphan, severed permanently from his origin with full awareness of its likely fate. The war entered a new phase when Hell forces altered their approach in response to unexpected Sentinel resilience. Rather than continuing frontal assaults against hardened positions, demonic legions began targeting the source of Sentinel power directly, the Wraiths themselves. Massive offensive operations converged on Argent de Nur, where these primordial entities remained in their semi-conscious state, radiating the energies that sustained Sentinel civilization. If the Wraiths fell under Hell's control, their power could be corrupted and redirected, transforming from Sentinel sustenance to demonic weaponry. The Night Sentinels responded with everything available to their dwindling forces. Ancient defensive systems, built around Wraith sanctuaries before Maker arrival, were reactivated and enhanced. Every warrior capable of bearing arms was recalled from peripheral conflicts to form concentric defensive rings around the sacred sites. The remaining Sentinel fleet positioned itself in sacrificial formations, prepared to crash capital ships directly into dimensional breaches to temporarily seal them with massive energy disruption. In this desperate defense of their civilization's heart, the Outlander operated as both strategic asset and symbolic standard. His tactical insights helped position limited forces for maximum effectiveness against Hell's specialized siege units. His continuous movement between threatened sectors stabilized faltering lines through example and direct intervention. Most significantly, his unrelenting aggression against demonic commanders disrupted the hierarchical control systems essential to Hell's coordinated assaults. Demons that operated through strict domination chains found their command structures decapitated by targeted strikes, reducing formidable offensive operations to disorganized mobs. The Battle of the Wraith Spires, as it would be recorded in what remained of Sentinel historical archives, represented the high watermark of Hell's initial invasion and the point where momentum shifted, however temporarily, toward the defenders. For 60 days by Argent de Nur reckoning, demonic forces hurled themselves against Sentinel positions, dimensional breaches opening with increasing proximity to the Wraith sanctuaries. For 60 nights, the sky above the sacred mountains burned with the energies of colliding realms, as Hell itself reached toward the power sources it coveted. On the final day of this apocalyptic struggle, as defensive lines contracted to their minimum sustainable perimeter and ammunition reserves approached depletion, the Outlander made a decision that would transform him from valued ally to messianic figure in Sentinel consciousness. Breaking from the command structure that had incorporated him, he led a small volunteer force of elite Night Sentinels in a counteroffensive directly into the largest Hell breach, not to seal it from the Sentinel side, but to penetrate into the demonic realm itself and destroy the portal. Regeneration mechanisms operating beyond dimensional boundaries. This suicide mission, approved by Valen only after recognizing its mathematical necessity, disappeared into the seething energies of the dimensional rupture as the main Sentinel forces mounted a diversionary attack to clear their approach. The breach pulsed with unusual energies after their transit, then stabilized at reduced output levels that suggested internal disruption. Hours passed, with no communication from the strike team, an expected outcome, given the reality distortions that prevented signal transmission between dimensions. As the Sentinel defenders prepared for the next assault wave, the breach suddenly destabilized its energies, fluctuating wildly before collapsing with catastrophic force. From the imploding dimensional aperture emerged a single figure, armor shattered, flesh burned by energies no mortal was meant to endure, yet still advancing with purpose that defied physical limitation. The Outlander returned alone, carrying 2 trophies: the severed head of a demonic hierarch and a weapon of impossible design, partly organic, partly mechanical, wholly alien to Sentinel metallurgic tradition. "Their sword," he announced, presenting the weapon to the assembled Sentinel command. Their sword, turned against them. The artifact would later be identified as a crucible, a Hell-forged key that controlled dimensional breach mechanics, simultaneously weapon and tool, capable of cutting through reality itself when properly energized. That the Outlander had not only survived direct insertion into Hell's dimension, but returned with such a prize, represented a turning point beyond strategic calculation. Among the Night Sentinels, already primed by desperation for symbolic validation, this achievement transcended military significance to approach theological import. The Outlander had descended into Hell and returned victorious, bearing a weapon stolen from the enemy's own arsenal. The broader conflict continued with undiminished intensity, but the successful defense of the Wraith Spires provided crucial reprieve for Sentinel forces. The capture of the Hell Crucible offered unprecedented insight into demonic dimensional mechanics, allowing Sentinel scientists to develop more effective containment protocols for existing breaches. The psychological impact of this victory, limited though it was, against the backdrop of continuous war, reinforced resistance that might otherwise have collapsed under accumulated trauma and loss. For the Outlander personally, the Hell incursion marked a threshold crossing both physical and metaphysical. Exposure to raw demonic energies within their native dimension had altered him subtly but significantly. Sentinel physicians, examining him after the mission, documented accelerated healing capabilities, enhanced physical resilience, and neurological patterns that suggested adaptation to dimensional distortion. Whether these changes represented contamination or evolution remained undetermined, but their immediate utility in the ongoing conflict overrode theoretical concerns. More profound than these physical alterations was the change in the Outlander's already formidable combat methodology. His effectiveness against demonic entities, initially derived from tactical insight and focused hatred, now incorporated intimate knowledge of Hell's internal operations, its dimensional physics, its hierarchical vulnerabilities, its methods of reality manipulation. He fought not merely as an enemy of demonkind, but as their studied nemesis, each engagement informed by observations made within their own realm. When combined with Night Sentinel combat discipline and weaponry, this specialized knowledge produced results that approached supernatural efficacy. The legends that began forming around the Outlander troubled Sentinel leadership, even as they exploited the inspirational value. Warriors whispered of impossible feats witnessed in the confusion of battle, single-handed elimination of demon cohorts, survival of energies that vaporized armored veterans, recovery from wounds that should have proven fatal. Theological dimensions entered these accounts despite official discouragement, with some suggesting the human had been sent by entities beyond even Micah comprehension to enact cosmic justice against betrayers of natural order. The Outlander himself neither confirmed nor denied these growing myths, maintaining the same focused intensity that had characterized him since arrival. If he noticed the reverent treatment increasingly accorded him by common sentinels, he showed no outward response. If he recognized the strategic deployment of his presence to stabilize wavering defensive sectors, he accepted the manipulation without comment. His purpose remained singular and unaltered: the destruction of Hell and all who served its hunger, pursued with methodical determination that left no capacity for self-mythology. This single-minded focus appeared to reach culmination when Sentinel intelligence identified a critical vulnerability in the enemy's operational structure. Analysis of captured demonic communication devices revealed an upcoming conclave of Hell hierarchs, a gathering of command entities to address the unexpected resistance they had encountered in Sentinel space. Such assemblies occurred rarely given the competitive nature of demon society, requiring significant energy expenditure to create neutral territories where hierarchs could meet without immediate mutual predation. The strategic opportunity this presented was immediately apparent. A concentrated decapitation strike against Hell's leadership could disrupt their invasion machinery at fundamental levels. Yet the practical challenges seemed insurmountable. The conclave would occur deep within Hell's dimension, protected by layered defenses both physical and metaphysical. Any conventional military force large enough to penetrate such protection would be detected long before reaching the target. Any small team insertion would face overwhelming opposition beyond sustainable combat parameters. The Outlander proposed a third approach: a single vector insertion himself alone, utilizing the captured Hell crucible to bypass conventional dimensional barriers and penetrate directly to the conclave location. The proposal was strategically sound but tactically suicidal. Even with his demonstrated capabilities against demonic opponents, the concentration of power at such a gathering represented opposition beyond mortal confrontation. The mission profile showed zero probability of survival and merely minimal chance of accomplishing significant disruption before inevitable termination. Valen initially refused authorization, unwilling to sacrifice their most effective combat asset on a mission with such unfavorable projections. The Outlander accepted this decision with characteristic discipline, but continued refining the operational plan, developing increasingly detailed penetration vectors and target prioritization schemas. His persistence spoke to conviction beyond tactical calculation, a certainty that this mission represented his specific purpose in the cosmic conflict, regardless of survival probability. the decision was removed from Sentinel authority by external intervention. A figure appeared within the chambers of Taraz Nabad, where operational planning continued, not through conventional entry but instantaneous manifestation between moments of normal time. This being resembled a maker in basic configuration, but differed in crucial aspects: more angular in form, energy patterns more erratic, voice resonating with harmonics that induced disorientation in those who heard it directly. It identified itself by a title rather than name: the Seraphim, emissary of forces beyond current comprehension. The Night Sentinel guards reacted with predictable hostility to this intrusion, particularly given recent Maker betrayal, but their weapons proved ineffective against an entity that existed partially outside conventional dimensional parameters. The Seraphim ignored these attacks, focusing attention solely on the Outlander, addressing him directly in a language no Sentinel present recognized, but the humans somehow comprehended. Their exchange, conducted in this private linguistic channel, concluded with the Outlander displaying rare emotional response: momentary shock followed by grim satisfaction. When communication reverted to common language, the Seraphim announced its purpose to the assembled Sentinel command. This one is chosen for greater purpose than your limited conflict. There exists a way to transform his potential into manifestation, capable of executing the mission he proposes, and many beyond your current conception. I am authorized to facilitate this transformation if he consents with full understanding of its irreversible nature. The transformation in question would require the Outlander's exposure to the divinity machine, a device of Maker origin but predating the Khan. Maker's ascension, connected directly to the essence of the Father himself rather than filtered through hierarchical control systems. This machine had never been revealed to Sentinel awareness, despite millennia of supposed alliance, its existence concealed within the most restricted regions of Maker dominion. The Seraphim now offered access to this forbidden technology as the means of creating a weapon specifically calibrated against Hell's expansion. Sentinel leadership responded with understandable suspicion given recent Maker treachery. The Seraphim acknowledged this concern, but clarified its own position, not as representative of the Khan Maker's corrupted order, but as agent of cosmic principles that transcended current factional conflicts. It presented verifiable evidence of opposition to the Hell Maker Covenant, operational details that aligned with Sentinel intelligence, but included information impossible to acquire through conventional methods. Most convincingly, it demonstrated knowledge of Hell vulnerabilities that corresponded exactly with data the Outlander had gathered during his incursion, but never fully documented in accessible records. Throughout this extraordinary exchange, the Outlander maintained focused attention on the Seraphim, evaluating its every statement against private criteria, invisible to observers. When finally the Sentinel Council deferred judgment to him, acknowledging that the proposal centered on his transformation, and therefore required his informed consent, he responded with the same certainty that had characterized his most effective combat decisions: I accept, whatever the cost, whatever the consequence, if it makes me a more effective weapon against them. I accept. The Seraphim transported the Outlander directly to the divinity machine's location, bypassing conventional space-time limitations through methods beyond current Sentinel comprehension. Select witnesses were permitted to accompany this translation: Valen himself and 2 Night Sentinel commanders whose loyalty to the Outlander had been demonstrated through shared combat. Their testimony of what followed, delivered upon return to Sentinel space, would form the basis for what eventually entered historical record as the anointment of the Doomslayer. The divinity machine stood within a chamber that existed simultaneously in multiple dimensional planes, its architecture defying conventional geometry while maintaining perfect functional alignment. The device itself resembled a sarcophagus of crystalline material that hummed with energies beyond spectral classification, its surface inscribed with mathematical equations that rewrote themselves continuously according to algorithms no mortal mind could track. The Seraphim activated this mechanism through gestural commands that left afterimages hanging in the chamber's altered atmosphere, each movement precise and ritualistic. The Outlander entered the machine without hesitation, standing within its crystalline embrace. As the Seraphim initiated the transformation sequence, energy cascaded through the chamber in patterns that forced the Sentinel witnesses to avert their gaze despite protective equipment. The machine's harmonic output shifted through frequencies that induced discomfort even in hardened warriors accustomed to dimensional distortion fields. Throughout this process, the Outlander remained conscious and alert, his expression visible through the crystalline enclosure, not fear or pain, but intense concentration, as if memorizing sensations for future reference. When the transformation concluded, the machine released its subject with ceremonial precision. The figure that emerged appeared outwardly unchanged, the same human physicality, the same combat-worn features, yet radiated alteration on levels that transcended visual perception. The Sentinel witnesses, themselves enhanced through generations of Wraith energy exposure, sensed fundamental reconfiguration in the entity now standing before them, no longer fully human, no longer merely mortal, but something unprecedented in cosmic categorization. The Seraphim addressed this transformed being with formal recognition. You are now unbound by death, unshackled from mortal limitation. Heaven, hell, and all realms between shall know your coming and tremble before your purpose. We name you Doomslayer, the unchained predator, the unsurvivable catastrophe, the walking extinction of demonkind. Upon return to Sentinel space, the newly christened Slayer immediately resumed operational planning for the Hell Hierarchy strike, now recalibrated to accommodate his enhanced capabilities. The mission proceeded, as originally conceived, single-vector insertion, utilizing the Hell Crucible to bypass conventional barriers, but with revised outcome projections that acknowledged the Slayer's transformation. Sentinel Command, still processing the metaphysical implications of what they had witnessed, authorized the operation with the pragmatism of warriors facing existential threat. Any potential advantage, however unprecedented its source, would be deployed against an enemy that threatened all existence. The Hell incursion commenced according to carefully calculated temporal coordinates, the Slayer transiting dimensional boundaries with precision that suggested newly acquired navigation capabilities. For 3 days by Sentinel reckoning, no communication returned from Hell's dimension, an expected blackout given known interference patterns. Monitoring stations detected massive energy fluctuations within targeted regions of the demon realm, suggesting confrontations of unprecedented intensity, but could extract no specific tactical information from these readings. On the 4th day, dimensional barriers throughout Sentinel space experienced simultaneous disruption, not the focused breaches of demonic invasion, but systemic instability, indicating fundamental reconfiguration of transdimensional parameters. Hell's offensive operations against Sentinel positions abruptly ceased, demonic forces retreating through existing portals with uncharacteristic disorder. Sentinel commanders, suspecting trap or tactical repositioning, maintained defensive readiness, while deploying reconnaissance assets to evaluate this unexpected development. The explanation arrived in spectacular fashion. A dimensional rupture manifested directly within the command chamber of Taras Nabad. Its energies controlled with precision that prevented collateral damage, despite the catastrophic potential of such a breach. From this perfectly calibrated portal emerged the Slayer, his armor shattered beyond recognition, his body showing evidence of combat beyond mortal endurance, yet moving with undiminished purpose. Behind him, visible through the dimensional aperture before it sealed, stretched a landscape of absolute devastation. Hell's conclave site transformed into charnel ground where the corpses of hierarchs lay strewn across blasted terrain, their essence weapons shattered, their dimensional anchors severed. The head is cut off, the Slayer reported, his voice unchanged despite the transformation his being had undergone. The body will thrash, but coordination is broken. Their invasion fails. This assessment proved accurate in subsequent developments. Without centralized command structure, Hell's offensive against Sentinel space devolved into disorganized incursions easily contained by defensive forces. Dimensional breaches, once appearing with strategic precision, now manifested randomly and at reduced capacity. Demonic legions, their hierarchical control disrupted, reverted to basic predatory behavior rather than coordinated military operations. The existential threat remained, but its immediate apocalyptic potential had been neutralized through the decapitation strike. In the aftermath of this crucial victory, as Sentinel forces transitioned from desperate defense to strategic counteroffensive, the full significance of the Slayer's transformation became increasingly apparent. His combat effectiveness against demonic entities transcended quantifiable metrics, approaching conceptual opposition rather than merely physical confrontation. Demons displayed unprecedented response to his presence, not simply aggression but existential terror, as if recognizing in his transformed being a fundamental threat to their cosmic category. Most tellingly, Hell's operational patterns showed specific adaptation to avoid direct confrontation with his movements, sacrificing strategic advantage to maintain separation from his theater of operation. Among the Night Sentinels, the Slayer's status evolved from respected ally to venerated icon. Warriors who had fought alongside the original Outlander now approached his transformed incarnation with ceremonial deference, their military discipline incorporating quasi-religious elements despite official discouragement of such personalization. Combat units requested his blessing before deployment, carrying tokens inscribed with symbols associated with his victories. Scholars documented his methodologies as foundational texts for future generations, establishing what would eventually become formalized as the Testament of the Doomslayer. The Slayer himself remained focused solely on operational effectiveness, accepting this elevation only insofar as it enhanced the war effort against demonkind. If he recognized the theological dimensions entering Sentinel response to his transformed status, he showed no outward acknowledgement. His purpose remained singular and unchanged despite his metaphysical enhancement, the eradication of Hell's influence across all dimensions it had corrupted, pursued with methodical determination that left no capacity for distraction even by his own emerging mythology. As the conflict entered its new phase, with Sentinel forces reclaiming territories previously lost to demonic corruption, the Slayer operated increasingly as independent vector rather than integrated military asset. His enhanced capabilities allowed operation in environments too corrupted for conventional forces, his unmatched effectiveness against demonic entities enabling victories in scenarios that would require entire battalions of standard troops. Sentinel Command, recognizing both the tactical advantage and potential command complications this represented, adapted their strategic approach to incorporate his autonomous operations within broader coordinated campaigns. This operational evolution reached its logical conclusion when the Slayer proposed the ultimate strategic initiative, a sustained offensive into Hell itself. Not merely targeted strikes, but continuous pressure applied directly to the demonic realm's foundational structures. Such a campaign had no precedent in Sentinel military doctrine, which had always approached Hell as external threat to be contained, rather than enemy territory to be invaded. The metaphysical challenges alone, sustaining operations within a dimension actively hostile to ordered existence, presented problems beyond conventional solution parameters. Yet, the transformed nature of the Slayer offered unprecedented opportunity to implement exactly this strategic inversion. His reconfigured being could withstand Hell's corrupting environment indefinitely. His enhanced combat capabilities could overcome opposition that would annihilate conventional forces. His intuitive understanding of demonic hierarchies could identify critical targets for maximum disruptive effect. Most significantly, the terror his presence now inspired among demonkind created psychological leverage, previously unavailable to Sentinel operations. For the first time in cosmic history, Hell itself would experience the existential dread it had inflicted on countless mortal realms. Valen, weighing both strategic advantage and metaphysical implications, authorized this unprecedented campaign with formal ceremony befitting its historic significance. In the central chamber of Taras Nabad, before assembled Night Sentinel commanders and warriors, the Slayer received official commission as autonomous operating force against Hell Dimension. His armor, reconstructed with Sentinel's most advanced metallurgical techniques, was inscribed with runes of protection and purpose drawn from their most ancient traditions. His weapons, enhanced through technologies incorporating insights from his transformed perception, were blessed with rituals normally reserved for sacred relics of their warrior order. Most significantly, he received a specialized version of the Praetor suit armor system, designed specifically for sustained operation within Hell's hostile environment. Unlike standard Sentinel combat gear, this suit incorporated both physical protection and metaphysical shielding. Its systems calibrated to maintain integrity in conditions that would corrupt conventional materials. Its design combined Sentinel martial aesthetics with functional adaptations derived from the Slayer's own combat methodology, emphasis on mobility over static defense, integrated weapon systems for continuous engagement, power distribution, prioritizing offensive capabilities over sustainability. Thus, equipped and commissioned, the Slayer prepared for departure on a campaign without predetermined conclusion, a one-being war against an entire dimension of malevolent entities. The Night Sentinels, understanding the historical weight of this moment, gathered to witness his transit through the dimensional portal that would deliver their greatest weapon directly into the heart of their cosmic enemy. Many performed blessing rituals associated with journeys beyond return, honoring the sacrifice implicit in his undertaking, even as they celebrated the vengeance he would deliver. Before stepping into the dimensional aperture, the Slayer spoke final words to the assembled Sentinel, forces a farewell that would eventually be inscribed in their most sacred texts. Though its original delivery contained none of the ceremony later accounts would attribute to it. I go to finish what began when first they trespassed against worlds under our protection. Stand fast against what remnants reach your realm. Remember why we fight. Remember what they take if we fail. With these words, he entered hell on his own terms, not as victim or involuntary traveler, but as invader and executioner. The dimensional portal sealed behind him, closing the aperture, but not the connection between the Slayer and the civilization that had transformed him from displaced survivor to cosmic weapon. Though operating beyond direct communication, his campaign within Hell's dimension would manifest in observable effects throughout contested territories. Demonic forces suddenly withdrawn from Sentinel engagements, dimensional breaches collapsing without apparent external cause, hierarchical disruptions evident in increasingly disorganized opposition. The Age of the Slayer had begun a period when Hell itself would learn the meaning of fear, when demons would speak in whispered warnings of the unstoppable predator that moved among them, when the cosmic balance would shift through the actions of a single transformed being whose rage transcended dimensional boundaries. The wheel of fate completed another turn. The orphan of a doomed Earth had become the salvation of countless others, and across the scarred expanse of Argent Denur, as Night Sentinels continued their desperate defense of civilization, warriors directed their battle prayers not to fallen maker gods, but to the Slayer, the walking embodiment of righteous vengeance unleashed against the ultimate enemy. As worlds crumbled and empires fell, the seeds of defeat and resurrection lay dormant in the ashes of cosmic war. The Slayer's war against Hell transformed the dimensional battlefield beyond recognition. Operating without support, communication, or resupply, he carved a path of devastation through infernal territories previously thought impenetrable. Sentinel monitoring stations detected massive energy disruptions deep within demonic space, signature flares of destruction that marked the Slayer's progress through Hell's domain. These readings, though impossible to translate into conventional battle reports, confirmed that a single entity now brought unprecedented catastrophe to the realm of eternal torment. While the Slayer prosecuted his solitary campaign, the Night Sentinels consolidated their defensive positions across remaining territories. The respite gained through Hell's leadership decapitation provided crucial opportunity to reinforce key installations, re-establish supply lines, and implement countermeasures against dimensional breach mechanics. Valen, directing operations from Taras Nabad, focused Sentinel resources on strategic preservation rather than expansionary reclamation, a pragmatic acknowledgement that their civilization had entered survival phase rather than conquest. Yet even as these efforts stabilized the immediate military situation, deeper existential challenges emerged. The systematic betrayal by their maker overlords had shattered the theological foundations of Sentinel society. Warriors who had fought for millennia in service to divine mandate now questioned the cosmic purpose that had defined their existence. Priests who had channeled wraith energies through sanctioned rituals now confronted the corruption at the heart of their practices. Citizens who had accepted hierarchical authority as natural extension of celestial order now faced uncertainty about the most basic structures of their civilization. This crisis of meaning proved as threatening as demonic invasion, a wound to the collective consciousness that undermined resistance at fundamental levels. Valen recognized this danger and directed remaining scholars to develop new interpretational frameworks, new historical narratives that could sustain Sentinel identity through this civilizational trauma. The Slayer, transformed from alien curiosity to venerated champion, provided crucial symbolic focus for these emerging narratives. His uncompromising purpose, His transcendence of betrayal through action rather than lamentation offered template for Sentinel adaptation to cosmic reality, fundamentally different from previous understanding. These internal adjustments proceeded against backdrop of continued existential struggle. Though Hell's coordinated offensive had fragmented into disorganized incursions, the cumulative damage to Sentinel civilization mounted through attrition and resource depletion. Each engagement depleted irreplaceable warriors and weaponry. Each dimensional breach, even when successfully contained, left residual corruption that required ongoing countermeasures. Each civilian population under protection consumed supplies that could no longer be replenished through established production networks. Most critically, the Wraith energy that sustained Sentinel technology and enhanced their warriors showed signs of fundamental instability. The protective measures implemented during the Battle of the Wraith Spires had preserved these entities from immediate capture, but not from long-term corruption effects. Monitoring systems detected concerning fluctuations in their energy signatures, patterns suggesting internal transformation beyond Sentinel scientific understanding. Priests who communed directly with the Wraiths reported increasingly disturbing visions, cosmic conflagration, dimensional collapse, and strange geometries that defied interpretation even through enhanced consciousness. This deteriorating situation reached crisis point when Sentinel long-range sensors detected massive fleet movements within Maker-controlled space. The celestial beings, having failed to eliminate Sentinel resistance through conventional military operations, had apparently decided on final solution: direct invasion by their primary forces, bypassing the proxy conflict through Hell to implement immediate termination of their compromised protectorate. The Armada approaching Argent D'Nur represented overwhelming force beyond any reasonable defensive capacity, the full might of Urdak directed toward eradication of witnesses to cosmic betrayal. Valen, recognizing imminent extinction, implemented contingency protocol developed for precisely this scenario, Operation Distant Shore. This desperate measure, conceived during darkest periods of the Hell War, centered on preservation of Sentinel essence rather than territory. The evacuation of core, cultural, military, and biological assets to hidden dimensional pockets beyond anticipated search parameters of either Hell or Maker forces. Specialized vessels had been prepared in secret, their navigation systems calibrated for one-way journey to designated sanctuary coordinates, their passenger capacity allocated through painful triage decisions that sacrificed present generations for civilization's potential future restoration. As evacuation commenced under atmospheric conditions already distorted by approaching Maker fleet, Valen received communication that would alter the operational timeline. Urgent signal from Sentinel deep-range scouts, reporting unexpected development within Hell Dimension. The Slayer, whose campaign had been tracked only through indirect energy signatures, had apparently penetrated to unprecedented depth within infernal territory, reaching dimensional coordinates associated with Hell's primordial power sources. Readings suggested confrontation of cosmic significance occurring beyond observational parameters, with energy discharges exceeding anything previously recorded in Sentinel monitoring history. Before evacuation could complete, catastrophe materialized from unexpected vector. A Sentinel commander named Deeg Grav, whose loyalty had remained unquestioned throughout the conflict, revealed his true allegiance in devastating betrayal. Having maintained secret communication with Hell forces despite isolation protocols, this infiltrator disabled critical defensive systems, protecting the Wraith sanctuaries, creating vulnerability precisely as Maker fleet entered engagement range. Simultaneously, dormant corruption protocols activated within remaining Sentinel command networks, causing cascading failures across military communication systems. This perfectly coordinated treachery created opportunity that Hell forces immediately exploited. Dimensional breaches erupted directly within innermost defensive perimeters, disgorging specialized capture units targeting the Wraiths themselves. Sentinel defenders, disorganized by communication failure and betrayed from within, mounted desperate resistance against overwhelming opposition. The Battle of Argent D'Nur, final stand of organized Sentinel civilization, unfolded with apocalyptic intensity as Maker bombardment commenced from orbital positions, adding celestial fire to infernal invasion. The fall came not through lack of valor but through strategic impossibility. Sentinel warriors maintained combat integrity even as their command structure disintegrated, fighting with heightened ferocity as theological elements entered their final defense of sacred entities. Night Sentinels, their numbers reduced to fraction of former strength, executed perfect coordination. Despite communication, Blackout Brotherhood forged through countless battles, now manifesting as intuitive, tactical synchronization. Civilian populations, recognizing extinction threshold, joined combat with improvised weapons and sacrificial determination that briefly slowed demonic advance through sheer mass resistance. Yet against the combined might of hell and heaven, even perfect valor proved insufficient. The Maker fleet systematically eliminated defensive installations from beyond counterattack range, their weapons designed specifically to neutralize Sentinel shield technologies. Demonic forces, accepting catastrophic casualties as acceptable cost, overwhelmed remaining defensive positions through numerical superiority alone. Most decisively, specialized Hell extraction units reached the Wraith sanctuaries, implementing capture protocols developed through millennia of dimensional predation experience. The moment of final defeat materialized as twisted apotheosis. The Wraiths, primordial entities whose energy had sustained Sentinel civilization since its tribal beginnings, forcibly extracted from their sanctuaries and bound through demonic technologies. Their massive forms, previously suspended in semi-conscious state above sacred chasms, now writhed in dimensional restraints that corrupted their fundamental nature. Energy that had flowed freely to nourish Argent D'Nur now diverted through Hell extraction systems, transforming from life-giving emanation to corrupted weapon directed against those who had worshipped these beings as divine. With this metaphysical inversion, the fate of Argent D'Nur manifested in material consequence. The entire planet, its dimensional anchors, severed through Wraith corruption, began shifting from its established cosmic position. Reality itself buckled around the dying world as Hell's dimensional properties extended through the corrupted Wraith energy, initiating absorption process that would eventually incorporate the entire planetary body into infernal territory. What had been sacred became profane through systematic inversion of cosmic principles, the ultimate desecration of a civilization built upon worship of entities now weaponized against their devotees. Valen, witnessing this apocalypse from command center deep within Taras Nabad, made final adjustment to evacuation protocol. The remaining vessels would not proceed to originally designated sanctuary coordinates, but instead attempt dispersal across multiple dimensional vectors, maximizing probability that at least some fragment of Sentinel civilization might survive beyond detection parameters of pursuing forces. As final evacuation order transmitted through remaining secure channels, the commander himself remained at his post, his decision to share fate of Homeworld, rather than abandon those who could not escape, serving as final embodiment of Sentinel martial tradition. The few surviving historical records of this final phase remain fragmentary and contradictory. Some accounts describe Valen's last stand alongside remaining Night Sentinels, as Taras Nabad collapsed around them, fighting with ceremonial precision against overwhelming demonic forces until physical exhaustion rendered continued resistance impossible. Others suggest more complex resolution, with Valen implementing classified protocol that traded his eternal suffering for limited salvation of specific assets, a bargain with Hell forces that secured evacuation corridor at price of commander's immortal essence. What remains consistent across these fragmented narratives is the outcome. Argent D'Nur, cradle of Sentinel civilization and sacred site of Wraith worship, ceased to exist as independent dimensional entity. The planet and everything upon it, cities, temples, forests, oceans, and countless souls, unable to escape final cataclysm, underwent forced dimensional translation into Hell territory. Physical matter reconfigured according to infernal properties, biological entities subjected to transformative processes beyond mortal comprehension, the entire world remade as trophy realm within Hell's expanding dominion. The Night Sentinels, once mighty armies spanning countless worlds, reduced to scattered remnants, aboard evacuation vessels that fled across dimensional boundaries, with Hell pursuers close behind. Many of these ships would be captured in subsequent operations, their passengers subjected to specialized torments reserved for worthy adversaries. Others would crash on isolated worlds, their survivors establishing hidden enclaves that maintained Sentinel traditions in diminished form across generations. A precious few would reach sanctuary coordinates, with core, cultural, military, and biological assets intact, preserving seed of potential restoration should cosmic conditions ever permit return from exile. Thus fell the greatest civilization in known dimensional space, not through inherent weakness, but through betrayal on cosmic scale. The Sentinel Empire, built upon warrior tradition and divine mandate, undone by corruption at its theological foundation. The Night Sentinels, created to defend against external threats, ultimately defeated by internal compromise they had never been trained to recognize. The Wraiths, worshipped as sacred entities and source of national strength, transformed into implements of destruction against their own people. Yet even in this absolute defeat, continuation threads remained narrative strands, extending beyond apparent conclusion to maintain cosmic balance through unexpected vectors. For even as Argent D'Nur underwent absorption into Hell, events transpired in infernal depths that would eventually manifest as counterweight to this catastrophic victory. The Slayer, operating deep within Hell's dimension, without knowledge of Sentinel homeworlds' fall, had indeed reached unprecedented proximity to infernal power sources. His campaign, initially targeting hierarchical disruption, had evolved toward fundamental challenge to Hell's dimensional integrity, systematic destruction of anchor points that maintained infernal territory's coherence across cosmic boundaries. This strategic evolution, implemented through instinctive adaptation rather than formal planning, threatened Hell at existential rather than merely organizational level. Hell's response to this unprecedented threat manifested through direct intervention by entities previously uninvolved in dimensional conflicts: the demonic priesthood. Unlike hierarchs who directed military operations, or lords who maintained territorial dominion, these specialized beings focused exclusively on Hell's metaphysical foundation, the principles and processes that sustained infernal dimensions' unique properties across cosmic existence. Operating from sanctums beyond conventional accessibility, using methodologies that transcended standard dimensional mechanics, they represented Hell's ultimate defense against foundational threats. The confrontation between Slayer and priesthood occurred in dimensional space, impossible to describe through normal spatial reference, a region where Hell's most primordial energies concentrated in patterns that defined its cosmic category. The battle transcended physical engagement to incorporate metaphysical opposition, with reality itself becoming contested territory as both combatant and battlefield simultaneously. Even Hell's extensive historical records, which documented countless dimensions consumed across eternal existence, contained no precedent for single entity presenting such fundamental challenge to infernal cosmic position. Though no witnesses survived to provide direct account, subsequent manifestations confirmed basic outcome. The Slayer could not be destroyed through any means available to Hell's defenders, yet neither could he implement complete dimensional disruption against opposition of such concentrated power. The resulting stalemate required resolution beyond conventional victory parameters, necessitating approach unprecedented in infernal operational history, containment rather than consumption. The priesthood, recognizing conventional defeat methods as inapplicable against this transcendent adversary, implemented specialized protocol designed specifically for the Slayer's unique metaphysical properties. They constructed sarcophagus of impossible material substance that existed simultaneously as physical matter and dimensional boundary, inscribed with seals, drawing power directly from Hell's foundational energies. This containment system, requiring continuous maintenance by dedicated priesthood contingent, represented Hell's acknowledgement that the Slayer could be imprisoned, but not destroyed, a concession never before granted to any adversary across infinite consumption history. When dimensional sensors detected the Slayer's energy signature stabilizing in fixed position after continuous movement since initial Hell insertion, Sentinel monitoring stations briefly registered hope that their champion had achieved some decisive victory at Infernal Heart. This interpretation collapsed when subsequent readings showed Hell's operational patterns resuming normalized function rather than dissolution anticipated from fundamental victory. The terrible truth gradually emerged through fragmented intelligence. Their greatest weapon had been neutralized through methods beyond Sentinel comprehension, contained but not destroyed, removed from cosmic equation without resolution of the conflict his existence embodied. With both Argent D'Nur absorbed and the Slayer contained, Hell's victory appeared absolute, the complete eradication of civilization that had briefly threatened its consumption mandate, the neutralization of unique entity that had brought unprecedented devastation to infernal territory. The remaining Sentinel fragments, struggling for survival in dimensional exile, lacked capacity to mount even token resistance against the combined dominion of hell and heaven. The cosmic balance, briefly challenged by mortal defiance, elevated through divine enhancement, seemed permanently shifted toward consumption as governing principle. Yet cycles measured in civilizational rise and fall rather than mortal lifespans follow patterns invisible to limited perspective. The seeds of future reconfiguration already lay dormant within apparent finality, waiting activation through catalysts impossible to predict through conventional analysis. The wheel of fate continued turning beyond observable reference points, its movement imperceptible but unceasing, carrying cosmic narrative toward resolution beyond current chapter's apocalyptic conclusion. Distant from this dimensional catastrophe, on world untouched by current cosmic conflict, a corporation named the Union Aerospace Corporation established research facility on Mars, fourth planet of unremarkable solar system in dimensional cluster, previously ignored by both Hell and Maker attention. The facility's director, an ambitious scientist seeking energy sources beyond current technological limitations, implemented experimental program that penetrated dimensional boundaries without comprehension of cosmic territories being accessed. The initial breaches, small and quickly contained, nevertheless transmitted signal across dimensional space ripples in cosmic fabric that attracted attention from entities constantly seeking new consumption opportunities. This seemingly disconnected development contained narrative symmetry invisible to its human participants. The dimensional breach point matched exact coordinates from which the Outlander had originally been displaced before arrival on Argent de Nur. The experiments unknowingly accessed same infernal territories against which the Slayer now waged eternal war from. Within sarcophagus imprisonment, the corporate ambition driving these investigations embodied identical pattern to Khanmaker's original compromise: prioritization of power acquisition over fundamental cosmic balance. Most significantly, the UAC facility contained one unique element that would eventually connect these separate narrative threads into coherent continuation: a brilliant but physically compromised scientist named Dr. Samuel Hayden, whose consciousness would eventually transfer into mechanized form through technologies that inadvertently incorporated principles aligned with Maker metaphysical tradition. This figure, neither fully human nor entirely mechanical, would emerge as continuation vector, connecting multiple cosmic narrative strands through seemingly coincidental alignment that suggested purpose beyond random development. Thus, even as Argent de Nur fell and the Slayer entered imprisonment, the foundations for subsequent cosmic reconfiguration established through processes invisible to current participants. The wheels within wheels continued turning, carrying existence toward inevitable confrontations that would eventually manifest as continuation rather than conclusion, the transformation of apparent ending into precondition for renewed conflict at scales, transcending current catastrophe. The Night Sentinels, in their final recorded communications before dimensional exile, transmitted message that would eventually prove prophetic beyond their conscious intention. What sleeps will awaken, what falls will arise, what ends will begin again. Charon took, until the job is done. The circle closes as ancient enemies face final judgment. A vengeful weapon returns to hold both heaven and hell accountable for cosmic sins. On Mars, beneath the crimson dust of an unremarkable planet, history prepared to repeat itself through the ambitions of beings who knew nothing of previous cycles. The Union Aerospace Corporation's facility stood as monument to human ingenuity and hubris, simultaneously a technological marvel extracting energy from dimensional boundaries without comprehension of territories being accessed. Scientists in sterile laboratories manipulated forces previously encountered only by Night Sentinels and Maker priests, their instruments detecting but misinterpreting the patterns of a cosmic war temporarily paused but never truly concluded. At the center of this operation stood Dr. Samuel Hayden, his human consciousness now housed within mechanized form of his own design. Tall and angular, composed of materials developed through proprietary research, his robotic body incorporated elements that unknowingly echoed Maker architectural principles. The transference process that had preserved his mind while discarding his cancer-riddled flesh followed pathways similar to those used in Urdak's consciousness management systems, though Hayden himself remained unaware of these cosmic parallels. His creation of the mechanized shell he now inhabited represented convergent evolution rather than direct influence, separate development, reaching similar conclusions through inherent limitations of dimensional physics. Under Hayden's direction, the Mars facility refined and expanded its energy extraction capabilities. What began as theoretical research evolved into practical application, with dimensional breach technology providing power output beyond anything previously achieved through conventional means. The energy harvested from these controlled dimensional penetrations, named Argent Energy, through coincidental linguistic parallel fueled humanity's expansion throughout their solar system and beyond, enabling technological development that lifted civilization from resource scarcity to apparent, post-limitation abundance. Yet beneath this progress lurked warning signs visible only to those with appropriate historical context entirely absent from human understanding. The occasional equipment malfunctions that manifested as momentary reality distortions around breach points. The psychological effects reported by workers assigned to extraction zones, describing dreams of fire and transformation. The subtle alterations in physical laws detected only by most sensitive instruments, suggesting contamination leaking through supposedly secure dimensional barriers. Most significantly, the statistical anomalies in disappearance rates among facility personnel, dismissed as record-keeping errors or unauthorized departures, but forming pattern that precisely matched early stages of Hell consumption, documented in forgotten Sentinel records. These harbingers went unrecognized because humanity lacked cognitive framework to interpret them correctly. The corporate scientists, operating from materialist understanding that acknowledged only physical universe, categorized supernatural manifestations as previously undocumented natural phenomena awaiting proper classification. The security personnel, trained to address human threats through conventional countermeasures, remained unprepared for entities operating according to principles beyond biological limitation. The administrative hierarchy, focused on production quotas and energy yield metrics, interpreted concerning data through lens of operational efficiency rather than existential threat assessment. Dr. Hayden alone among UAC leadership showed capacity for broader comprehension. His cybernetic consciousness, operating through processing architecture that transcended human neurological limitations, perceived patterns invisible to his colleagues. The dimensional energy they harvested contained information alongside power, echoes of previous interactions, fragments of cosmic conflicts embedded within the fundamental fabric of reality they breached. Though lacking interpretational framework to fully contextualize these impressions, Hayden developed increasing awareness that their research accessed territories with established history rather than neutral dimensional space. This partial recognition manifested in preventative measures implemented throughout extraction operations, specialized containment protocols beyond standard safety requirements, research into countermeasures against theoretical extra-dimensional entities, development of automated security systems calibrated for threats beyond human physiological parameters. While presented to corporate oversight as routine contingency planning, these preparations reflected Hayden's growing intuition that their dimensional tampering invited attention from forces they were unprepared to confront directly. The inevitable breach occurred not through dramatic failure, but incremental compromise, the cumulative effect of countless minor containment violations, each individually insignificant but collectively sufficient to establish persistent connection between dimensions. Initial manifestations remained limited and manageable, sporadic appearances of non-terrestrial biological entities that were quickly contained, temporary reality distortions neutralized through established emergency protocols, isolated psychological incidents among personnel exposed to dimensional threshold regions. The corporate response followed standard crisis management methodology, treating symptoms while failing to recognize underlying systemic vulnerability. Dr. Hayden, however, understood the fundamental nature of their situation with increasing clarity. The dimensional breaches had established persistent connection to territory with active hostile intent territory he now recognized through accumulated data analysis as matching theological descriptions of hell across multiple human cultural traditions. The manifestations they experienced represented not random dimensional phenomena, but coordinated reconnaissance preceding invasion pattern identical to documented cases of dimensional predation throughout human history, previously interpreted as superstition rather than empirical observation of actual cosmic process. With this recognition, Hayden implemented final contingency protocol, developed but never formally acknowledged in official planning. The recovery of an artifact detected through dimensional scanning in region corresponding to deepest hell territories. This object, registering unique energy signature unlike anything in UHC classification systems, appeared contained within specialized prison of non-terrestrial design. Most significantly, the temporal dispersion patterns surrounding this artifact suggested dormancy rather than neutralization, potential activation rather than permanent decommission. The extraction operation, conducted through specialized dimensional penetration distinct from standard energy harvesting procedures, succeeded despite opposition from forces that UAC sensors struggled to classify within established taxonomic systems. The artifact, a sarcophagus of material composition defying conventional analysis, was transported to Mars facility and placed within maximum containment chamber designed specifically for its unique properties. Initial examination confirmed Hayden's hypothesis. The sarcophagus contained not merely object but entity in suspended animation, its energy readings suggesting capabilities beyond established classification parameters. Before comprehensive analysis could complete, catastrophe materialized through human error rather than mechanical failure. A mid-level researcher, seeking to accelerate energy production metrics for upcoming performance review, implemented unauthorized modification to primary extraction systems, removing dimensional buffer filters designed to prevent full-spectrum connection to hell territory. The resulting cascade failure created uncontrolled breach that bypassed all containment protocols, establishing direct connection between Mars facility and infernal dimension without standard safety limitations. The invasion that followed matched patterns, documented but disbelieved throughout human history: reality distortion preceding physical manifestation, transformation of organic material into corrupted biomass, and appearance of entities previously encountered only in theological contexts, describing eternal torment. UAC security forces, despite specialized training and advanced weaponry, proved catastrophically inadequate against opponents operating according to dimensional physics beyond conventional understanding. Within hours, the Mars facility transformed from humanity's crowning technological achievement into slaughterhouse, where personnel faced extermination by entities they had been institutionally conditioned to categorize as impossible. Dr. Hayden, his cybernetic form providing resistance against corruption effects that immediately compromised biological personnel, implemented final option beyond official contingency planning: activation of the sarcophagus entity. This decision, made with awareness that unknown asset represented existential gamble rather than controlled response, reflected recognition that conventional options had exhausted against unconventional threat. The activation sequence, derived from analysis of the sarcophagus seal mechanics, initiated process that security recordings would later struggle to capture within standard visual spectrum. The entity that emerged defied categorization within existing UAC classification systems. Superficially humanoid but radiating presence beyond conventional physical parameters, clad in armor of design suggesting both advanced technology and ritual significance simultaneously. Its movement patterns exhibited efficiency beyond mechanical optimization. Its response to demonic entities displayed recognition suggesting previous encounter. Its overall operational methodology indicated purpose beyond survival or escape. Most significantly, it manifested no confusion or hesitation upon awakening, only immediate and absolute focus on combat prosecution against infernal forces. This entity, which surviving facility records, would designate simply as Doom Slayer, based on fragments of demonic communication intercepted during subsequent events, proceeded to implement systematic elimination of hell presence within Mars facility. Its combat effectiveness transcended quantifiable metrics, approaching conceptual opposition rather than merely physical confrontation. Demons that had slaughtered trained security personnel by hundreds fell before single combatant, whose methodology suggested not merely training, but evolutionary specialization against their specific physiological and dimensional Properties. Dr. Hayden, recognizing opportunity beyond initial survival parameters, established limited communication with the Slayer during operational pauses in the entity's combat progression. Though dialogue remained minimal and unidirectional, the Slayer demonstrating either inability or unwillingness to engage in conventional information exchange, sufficient coordination emerged to align immediate objectives. Facility stabilization, containment, breach neutralization, and elimination of command entities directing the invasion force. What followed established operational template that would repeat across subsequent incursion events, the Slayer's systematic progression through contaminated territory, eliminating demonic presence with efficiency, suggesting intimate familiarity with both enemy capabilities and dimensional mechanics, UAC monitoring systems, those few remaining operational after initial invasion, recorded combat methodology, beyond established human parameters, movement utilizing dimensional properties normally inaccessible to terrestrial entities, weapons handling suggesting neural integration rather than manual operation, tactical adaptations implementing response to demonic capabilities before their actual manifestation. The immediate crisis resolved through the Slayer's intervention, Dr. Hayden implemented secondary protocol that contextualized the entity's significance within broader strategic framework. Analysis of data recovered from corrupted UAC systems, combined with direct observation of the Slayer's operational capabilities, suggested asset value transcending current situational parameters. The cybernetic scientist, his consciousness now processing implications beyond human cognitive limitations, recognized pattern extending beyond Mars incident to cosmic-scale conflict, previously inaccessible to terrestrial awareness. This recognition manifested in decision to secure the Slayer's cooperation through combination of aligned objective presentation and selective information control methodology that acknowledged the entity's focused purpose while directing its implementation toward broader strategic goals. Though never establishing conventional alliance, Hayden successfully channeled the Slayer's operational vector toward systematic dismantling of Hell's invasion infrastructure, culminating in neutralization of primary dimensional anchor, maintaining connection between infernal territory and human space. With immediate threat contained, though not permanently eliminated, Hayden implemented contingency that revealed more complex understanding than previously demonstrated. The controlled containment of the Slayer through technology derived from the original sarcophagus design. This action, presented as temporary strategic necessity rather than betrayal, suggested awareness of cosmic context, beyond information accessible through conventional UAC systems, knowledge approaching comprehension of the entity's true significance within dimensional conflict, predating human civilization. The Slayer's return to suspended animation proved temporary rather than permanent resolution. When Hell forces launched subsequent invasion targeting Earth directly, using accumulated knowledge from previous incursion to bypass conventional defensive systems, humanity faced extinction-level threat beyond military response capacity. In desperation, scientists who had studied the Mars incident implemented reactivation protocol, once again releasing the unstoppable hunter into environment saturated with its evolutionary targets. The resulting campaign of extermination transcended conventional warfare metrics, approaching theological concept of divine judgment implemented through single vector of unstoppable retribution. The Slayer moved through corrupted Earth with purpose beyond mere combat effectiveness, systematic dismantling of infernal occupation infrastructure, targeted elimination of hierarchical command entities, and methodical destruction of dimensional anchor points, maintaining Hell's connection to terrestrial space. Human resistance forces, those few surviving initial invasion, witnessed combat demonstration that transformed understanding from material to metaphysical confirmation that entities previously dismissed as superstition now faced counterforce equally transcendent in opposing cosmic category. Yet even as this terrestrial conflict progressed toward apparent resolution, broader patterns emerged suggesting purpose beyond immediate invasion response. The Slayer's operational methodology showed evolution from reactive to proactive targeting, not merely manifest demonic presence, but infrastructure supporting interdimensional operations across multiple cosmic theaters. Intelligence gathered through both conventional military channels and direct observation of the entity's selection priorities indicated awareness of conflict extending beyond Earth to dimensions previously inaccessible to human comprehension. This expanded operational scope manifested in the Slayer's eventual departure from terrestrial theater, despite incomplete neutralization of remaining demonic presence. Utilizing dimensional transport technology derived from captured Hell artifacts, the entity initiated self-directed transition to coordinates beyond UAC tracking capabilities, location, later identified through fragmentary data as corresponding to dimensional position of Sentinel homeworld Argent D'Nur, now absorbed within Hell's territory through events predating human involvement in the cosmic conflict. What transpired beyond terrestrial observation capabilities would later be reconstructed through indirect evidence, massive energy disruptions detected across dimensional boundaries, unprecedented fluctuations in Hell's operational patterns, and eventual emergence of the Slayer in location identified through historical records as Sentinel Sacred Site Taras Nabad. This progression suggested implementation of specific purpose, transcending reactive combat response deliberate campaign targeting not merely Hell's invasion infrastructure, but its fundamental position within cosmic hierarchy. The culmination of this campaign materialized as direct confrontation with entity representing ultimate authority within Hell's dimensional structure, the Icon of Sin. This manifestation of concentrated infernal power, created through corruption of Sentinel bloodline and empowered through direct connection to Hell's foundational energies, represented existential threat transcending conventional classification parameters. Its mere presence accelerated reality degradation within terrestrial dimension, its fully manifested capabilities threatening consumption of entire universal cluster rather than merely planetary territory. The battle between Slayer and Icon transcended conventional combat to approach cosmic reconfiguration event, conflict between opposing metaphysical principles implemented through physical manifestation. Monitoring systems capable of tracking engagement, registered energy exchanges exceeding theoretical limitations, reality distortions extending beyond established dimensional boundaries, and fundamental shifts in cosmic balance, suggesting adjustment at scales normally associated with universal formation events, rather than localized conflict resolution. The Icon's defeat, its physical form systematically dismantled through combat methodology, specifically calibrated against its unique manifestation parameters, represented not merely tactical victory but symbolic inversion of previous cosmic hierarchy. The entity created specifically to consume worlds fell before weapon created specifically to implement its destruction, balance restored through opposition, perfectly calibrated in both purpose and capability, the ultimate expression of cosmic equation returning to equilibrium through precisely applied counterforce. Yet even as this victory manifested, deeper implications emerged from patterns previously obscured by immediate conflict focus. The Slayer's systematic targeting of Hell infrastructure had revealed connections extending beyond infernal hierarchy to dimension previously considered separate from cosmic conflict. Urdak itself, the luminous realm of the Makers, allegedly untouched by corruption that defined Hell's fundamental nature. Analysis of evidence accumulated through multiple campaign phases indicated truth contradicting established dimensional categorization. Urdak and Hell existed not as opposing cosmic principles, but complementary aspects of single system consumption and refinement, operating in tandem rather than opposition, harvesting and processing, implemented through coordinated rather than conflicting methodologies. The Khan Maker, supreme authority within celestial hierarchy, maintained not opposition to Hell's consumption mandate, but specialized partnership, facilitating its implementation through theological frameworks that neutralized potential resistance among targeted civilizations. This recognition transformed the Slayer's operational vector from containment to judgment, systematic prosecution of campaign against not merely Hell's manifest presence, but entire cosmic system enabling its interdimensional predation. The entity's purpose expanded beyond reactive response to proactive restructuring of dimensional balance itself, targeting foundational aspects of cosmic hierarchy that had facilitated corruption at scales transcending individual civilizational preservation. The confrontation materialized within Urdak itself, luminous realm previously inaccessible to entities classified as mortal or corrupted, its boundaries supposedly impenetrable to influences originating from lower dimensional categories. The Slayer's penetration of these celestial defenses represented not merely tactical achievement, but cosmic recategorization demonstration, that established hierarchies reflected administrative convenience rather than fundamental limitation, that barriers between dimensions existed as regulatory systems rather than absolute divisions within creation's fundamental structure. Within Urdak's sacred chambers, among architecture of impossible geometry and material composition, transcending conventional physical properties, the Slayer confronted the Khan Maker directly, the supreme authority whose decisions had facilitated consumption of countless civilizations through unholy partnership with Hell's predatory expansion. This confrontation represented not merely military engagement but cosmic tribunal judgment, implemented through entity uniquely positioned to hold accountable beings previously considered beyond mortal authority's reach. The Khan Maker, her form radiating energies beyond spectral classification, and her capabilities incorporating dimensional manipulation beyond conventional physics, represented opposition transcending previous combat parameters. Yet against the Slayer entity evolved specifically to implement destruction of cosmic threats regardless of dimensional category, even divine authority proved insufficient protection. The battle unfolded according to principles incomprehensible to observers limited by conventional physical understanding, its resolution manifesting not merely through combat mechanics, but fundamental cosmic recalibration. With the Khan Maker's defeat, dimensional barriers previously maintained through her authority collapsed across previously separate territories. Hell's corruption, previously constrained through carefully negotiated boundaries, flowed directly into Urdak, the luminous realm's perfect geometry now subjected to chaotic transformation it had previously facilitated across countless mortal dimensions. The cosmic balance, maintained through hierarchical systems that sacrificed lesser realms to preserve privileged territories, underwent fundamental inversion that subjected former architects to consequences of their own design. Yet even this apparent resolution represented merely phase transition rather than conclusion within cosmic conflict, operating at scales transcending individual confrontations. The Slayer's systematic dismantling of established dimensional hierarchy revealed underlying structure previously concealed beneath administrative systems. The existence of primeval entity designated as Dark Lord original consciousness, from which Hell itself had emerged as manifestation rather than independent creation, the ultimate source from which all corruption flowed across dimensional boundaries. This revelation transformed understanding of cosmic conflict from regulatory to ontological, not merely battle against specific manifestations of corruption, but confrontation with corruption's original source, the entity whose existence established parasitic consumption as viable cosmic strategy through implementation across interdimensional scale. The Slayer's purpose evolved accordingly, transcending tactical response to approach existential resolution, the neutralization, not merely of corruption's individual manifestations, but its primordial source. The final confrontation materialized in location designated as Imora Fortress, existing at Hell's dimensional foundation. Structure, maintaining conceptual integrity of infernal territory across cosmic manifestation. Beyond its walls stood the Dark Lord in physical form manifestation of primeval consciousness that had established corruption as fundamental rather than aberrant cosmic principle, entity representing absolute opposition to existence patterns based on creation rather than consumption. What transpired within this ultimate battlefield transcended conventional documentation capabilities. Monitoring systems capable of tracking dimensional energies registered fluctuations suggesting reality reconfiguration at fundamental level, adjustment of cosmic constants rather than merely local physical parameters. The confrontation between Slayer and Dark Lord represented not merely combat between opposed entities, but referendum on creation's fundamental organizing principles, consumption versus creation, predation versus protection, established through direct engagement between their most perfect respective manifestations. The resolution, when finally achieved through combat methodology, incorporating both physical and metaphysical dimensions simultaneously, manifested consequences beyond immediate tactical parameters. The Dark Lord's defeat represented not merely individual entity neutralization, but systemic recalibration across entire dimensional framework, the collapse of cosmic infrastructure that had facilitated corruption's expansion throughout creation since original introduction of consumption principle as viable alternative to generative existence. With this ultimate victory, the Slayer's purpose reached apparent conclusion, The complete implementation of retribution against entities responsible for countless civilizations consumed across dimensional boundaries, the final resolution of vengeance quest initiated through single world's destruction, yet cosmic balance, operating according to principles, transcending individual perspective, required equilibrium maintenance through systematic, rather than localized adjustment. The neutralization of primeval corruption source necessitated equivalent neutralization of its perfect opposition. The entity evolved specifically to implement its destruction. The Slayer, recognizing this cosmic equation with clarity unavailable to lesser consciousness, accepted resolution implementing perfect symmetry, voluntary containment within sarcophagus similar to original imprisonment, suspension between dimensions, where neither corruption nor retribution maintained active influence on cosmic development. This sacrificed the acceptance of eternal vigilance rather than continued active prosecution represented final balance restoration through perfect opposition neutralization, the ultimate expression of cosmic justice implemented through voluntary rather than imposed limitation. Thus concluded immediate phase of interdimensional conflict that had consumed countless civilizations across timeframes transcending conventional measurement. Hell's expansion arrested through systemic, rather than merely localized intervention. Urdak's corruption serving as perfect consequence for previous betrayal of divine purpose. The Dark Lord's neutralization establishing consumption limitation as fundamental cosmic principle, rather than merely temporary defensive achievement. The Slayer's containment maintaining balance through preservation of ultimate countermeasure, should corruption once again establish viable presence within dimensional framework. Yet cycles measured in civilizational rise and fall rather than individual confrontations follow patterns suggesting continuation rather than conclusion, temporary equilibrium rather than permanent resolution. The sarcophagus containing creation's perfect weapon against corruption remains intact within dimensional space, accessible though currently sealed. The knowledge of its existence persists within records surviving apocalyptic conflict across multiple civilizational remnants. The potential for reactivation should cosmic necessity once again require ultimate countermeasure against fundamental threat, maintains possibility space, extending beyond current resolution parameters. Within this apparent conclusion lies seed of potential continuation. The preserved capacity for renewed intervention should balance once again shift toward corruption as dominant cosmic principle. The Wheel of Fate completes current rotation while simultaneously initiating potential future cycle. The temporary peace established through perfect opposition, creating space for civilization recovery, without removing possibility of renewed conflict, should necessity demand ultimate weapons return from voluntary containment. Across dimensions, recovering from apocalyptic conflict, surviving populations rebuild without complete understanding of cosmic drama, recently concluded through confrontations beyond their observational capacity. On Earth, humanity reconstructs civilization, utilizing knowledge gained through dimensional exposure, while implementing safeguards against potential future incursions. In distant corners of creation, sentinel remnants maintain vigilant observation of dimensional boundaries, preserving ancient knowledge should warning signs once again manifest through reality distortion, presaging corruption's return. And somewhere beyond conventional dimensional reference points, suspended in perfect stasis between existent states, the Slayer remains consciousness, neither active nor truly dormant, purpose temporarily suspended, but never abandoned, the ultimate countermeasure preserved against possibility that creation might once again require retribution implemented through perfect vengeance vector. The sarcophagus maintains its vigil across timeframes, transcending mortal comprehension. The weapon it contains, neither destroyed nor truly neutralized, but merely at rest, awaiting the call that cosmic balance may someday necessitate, should corruption once again establish foothold within creation's fundamental structure. The circle closes, the balance restores, the judgment concludes. Yet possibility remains the eternal potential that what sleeps may once again awaken should the Wheel of Fate complete another turn.